Chapter 676. Brother Yi, you seem to have offended quite a number of people, Kenpo said with a faint smile. It doesn't matter. I'll meet them eventually. Yi Guqin was quite open-minded. Ha, Brother Ye's character is truly the model of a sword cultivator. I wonder if we can be friends. Kenpo said with a laugh. The more he looked at Yi Guqin, the more he liked him. Whether it was in terms of sword skills or character, Yi Guqin seemed to be a natural sword cultivator. I'm honored. Yi Guqin also smiled. If Kenpo wasn't here today, he was afraid that he would be in a lot of trouble. Although Yi Guqin wasn't afraid of trouble, it would still take a lot of effort. However, I'm afraid Brother Yi won't be so simple in the preliminaries of the battlefield of prodigies, Kenpo said. I'm a sword cultivator. Why should I be afraid of a battle? Yi Guqin was quite carefree. I'm a sword cultivator. Why should I be afraid of a battle? I really want Brother Yi to join my sword dynasty, Kenpo said with a smile. As soon as he said that, everyone in the square tower fell silent. Could it be that this low-level dynasty's prodigy was going to reach the heavens in a single step? Looking at the many gazes around him, Kenpo paused for a moment, then said, Brother Yi, let's talk outside. All right. Yi Guqin nodded slightly. They didn't need to stay here any longer. They immediately left the square tower. However, one could well imagine that what had happened here would spread throughout the imperial city at an extremely fast speed. Yi Guqin's name would truly begin to appear in the eyes of some dynasty's prodigies. On the streets of the imperial capital, Yi Guqin and the others walked towards the inn. Kenpo walked lazily beside him, still wearing the mask on his face. Brother Kenpo, aren't you going to take off your mask? Yi Guqin asked. This is the rule of our sword dynasty. The moment you become the sword's son, you must temporarily discard your identity and name, wear a mask, and use the surname Jian, Kenpo replied. Could it be that you're going to be like this forever? Yi Guqin asked. That's not it either. There are two ways to regain your identity. The first is to become Jiankui, the leader of the sword faction. That's pretty much the same as the crown prince. In the future, you'll lead the sword dynasty. The second is to give up your identity as the sword's son, Kenpo said. I see. Yi Guqin finally understood. The sword's son was equivalent to the prince, and Jiankui was equivalent to the crown prince. This sword dynasty is really different from other dynasties. Brother Yi, what do you think? Do you want to join the sword dynasty? With Brother Ye's talent, you might be able to become a sword's son. That way, you won't have to go through the preliminaries and can directly participate in the battle of prodigies, said Kenpo. Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment. To be honest, he was somewhat interested in the sword dynasty. After all, the sword dynasty was a country of sword cultivators. Aside from the heavenly god sword sect, the 4 great sword pavilions, and some other overlord forces, the place with the highest concentration of sword cultivators was the sword dynasty. One could imagine how wonderful the sword dynasty was. With Yi Guqin's background as the sword demon, he would definitely be able to do well in the sword dynasty. However, Yi Guqin still had some unresolved matters in the Saint Origin dynasty. I still have some important matters to attend to in the Saint Origin dynasty. I'm afraid I won't be able to go to the sword dynasty for the time being. Yi Guqin shook his head. Is that so? That's a pity. With Brother Ye's talent, if you follow me to the sword dynasty, you might be able to shine brightly. You might even be able to pull down that Jiankui. Kenpo sighed. He held Yi Guqin in high esteem. With Yi Guqin's talent, if he could obtain the cultivation treasures and resources of the sword dynasty, he would definitely soar to the heavens. Perhaps he could even help him deal with that great enemy. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. It seemed like Kenpo and that Jiankui of the sword dynasty didn't have a good relationship. Even so, Yi Guqin could tell that Kenpo didn't have any intention of using him. Yi Guqin's rejection only made Kenpo feel that it was a pity, but he didn't care too much about it. This sword son token is for Brother Yi. If Brother Yi comes to the Sword Dynasty in the future, it will be much more convenient with this token. Kenpo took out a token. Thank you. Yi Guchen accepted it and nodded slightly. This trip to the imperial capital wasn't bad for him. He obtained the 9 Orifice Divine Stone, the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array, and even got to know Kenpo of the Sword Dynasty. The only regret was that he didn't obtain the Chaos Origin Crystal. Without the Chaos Origin Crystal, Yi Guchen wouldn't be able to pass the soul tribulation in his spiritual sea. He wouldn't be able to awaken the Yuan spirit of Su Jianchu's father, Su Qingyu. Thinking of this, Yi Guchen sighed. Kenpo couldn't help but ask, "Why are you sighing, Brother Yi?" Yi Guchen shook his head and said, "There are still some things I need that I haven't obtained." When Saber 9 heard that, he pondered for a moment before saying, "I heard that Princess Phoenix Dawn will be holding a private treasure auction in a few days. Although the rarity of the items might not be much higher than the Dynasty auction, I'm afraid there will be many strange and unusual items since it's a private transaction." Treasure auction? Yi Guchen's eyes lit up. However, the person holding the treasure auction was actually Princess Phoenix Dawn. On the other side, Yan Wushuang's expression didn't look too good. She was worried about Yi Guchen. After all, Yi Guchen had offended Princess Phoenix Dawn's maid, Chu Huang. Yi Guchen thought for a moment and asked, "I wonder if I can go." The Chaos Origin Crystal was too important to him. Even if there was only a 1 in a million chance, Yi Guchen had to go and take a look. "Of course, that's not a problem. I'll take you there," Saber 9 said, smiling nonchalantly. He didn't need to care about Princess Phoenix Dawn. "Thank you," Yi Guchen said. Although Yan Wushuang and the others were worried, they were slightly relieved with Kenpo around. No matter how Princess Phoenix Dawn targeted Yi Guchen, she wouldn't go too far with Kenpo around. After that, Yi Guchen and the others returned to the inn. Yi Guchen secretly passed the Divine Emperor Sword Art to Su Jianchu. Su Jianchu had the enlightened sword heart, and with the support of the human ruler's sword, it wasn't a problem for her to comprehend the Divine Emperor Sword Art. As for Yi Guchen, he began refining the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array while waiting for the treasure auction to start. To be honest, Yi Guchen didn't have high hopes, but he wasn't willing to give up. If he could really cultivate the chaotic spiritual sea, Yi Guchen was confident that he could win both the Forbidden City's Battle of Prodigies and the Battle of Prodigies qualifiers. If I can really cultivate the chaotic spiritual sea, then it's about time to start cultivating that sword art, Yi Guchen muttered to himself. He wasn't talking about the immortal god's weep, but another sword art. It was a sword art that he already knew in his heart. "I wonder if I'm unfamiliar with it." Yi Guchen's eyes revealed a wisp of vicissitudes. Of course, before that, Yi Guchen still had to refine the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array. In the past few days, Yi Guchen had been holed up in the inn. He had fused his essence blood into the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array to support the Nirvana demonic flame and finally refined the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array. However, with Yi Guchen's current strength, he couldn't fully unleash the power of the 5 Emperor's Universe Sword Array. But even if he could only unleash a portion of its power, it was still shocking enough. After all, he had the support of the 5 Elements Sword Intent. After a few days of cultivation, the day of Princess Phoenix Dawn's treasure auction arrived. Chapter 677. Princess Fengshi's treasure auction was a private event. Thus, it wasn't like the Dynasty auction, where everyone knew about it. Those who could participate in the treasure auction were mostly prodigies with some status, wealth, or background. On this day, Yi Guchen followed Kenpo to the treasure auction. It was called the Morning Phoenix Pavilion. The Morning Phoenix Pavilion wasn't located in the center of the imperial capital. Instead, it was located in a more secluded area. From afar, the pavilion looked extremely luxurious. It was obvious that only someone with some status could book it. Yi Guchen and Kenpo entered the Morning Phoenix Pavilion. A group of prodigies had already gathered in the pavilion, and they were chatting in groups of 2s and 3s. Compared to the prodigies who came to the Dynasty auction, There were undoubtedly very few prodigies in the treasure auction. However, most of them were prodigies from high-tier and top-tier dynasties. Even prodigies from intermediate-tier dynasties like K Ling, and Ku Mo weren't qualified to participate. Yiguchin and Kenpo immediately attracted the attention of many when they entered. "It's Kenpo from the Sword Dynasty," some of the prodigies exclaimed in surprise. The Sword Dynasty was simply too famous. It was the leader of the 100 dynasties in the South Sky region. Thus, the Sword Son of the Sword Dynasty was also rather eye-catching. However, when everyone's gazes shifted to Kenpo, their expressions changed slightly. Yiguchin's name had recently resounded in the ears of the various dynasties' prodigies. In particular, his fearless personality made many sky prides displeased. What right did a prodigy from a low-tier dynasty have to be arrogant? Yiguchin actually came to the treasure auction. What a joke. Doesn't he know that the treasure auction is hosted by Princess Fengxi? Yeah, he severely offended Princess Fengxi's maid, Chu Huang, at the dynasty auction. How dare he show up now? Could it be that Yiguchen is here to apologize? Some of the geniuses whispered among themselves. However, they did not dare to speak loudly because they were worried about Kenpo. Yiguchen's expression was indifferent, but he could feel some cold gazes focused on him. The great Yu dynasties Yu Wenji and the Heavenly Star dynasties Duanmu Yu were all present. There was also Prince Xingli, whose gaze was slightly deep as he looked over. But because of Kenpo, they didn't say much. However, at this moment, a familiar voice that was filled with surprise suddenly rang out. "Hey, big brother, is that you?" Upon hearing this voice, Yiguchen was slightly taken aback. He looked towards the source of the voice. He saw a plump little fatty dressed in a golden robe with a sword at his waist. He looked quite wealthy and was looking at him in surprise. "You are." Yiguchen felt a sense of familiarity, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. "Have you forgotten?" Back then at the Beichen Mansion auction, there was the sword seeking steel. The little fatty ran over and held Yiguchen's hand as if he had seen a fellow villager. "So, it's you." Yiguchen came to a realization. Back then, when he was an assassin at the Blood Listening Tower, the first blood mission he took was to head to the Beichen Mansion to exterminate the Situ family. At that time, he had met the little fatty for the first time at the Heavenly Saint Chamber of Commerce's auction. Later on, in the great wild forest outside the sword-seeking steel at the Sky Sword Peak, he even saved the little fatty's life. The little fatty also ascended the sword-seeking steel with him and sat cross-legged in front of the Tao Comprehension Stone. However, he disappeared after that. He didn't expect to meet the little fatty here. "Brother Yi, long time no see." The little fatty looked as if he had met an old friend in a foreign land. The fat on his face was trembling. "Why are you here?" Yiguchen said with a faint smile. This mischievous little fatty was quite interesting. "Shoo, I'll tell you later." The little fatty looked left and right and said mysteriously. Yiguchen laughed and nodded slightly. At the same time, he was secretly surprised. When he first met the little fatty, he felt that there was something wrong with the little fatty. He could sense an extremely strong sword intent from little fatty's body. However, that sword intent seemed to have been deliberately sealed by someone. Now that Yiguchen's divine soul perception had improved, he could feel that the little fatty seemed to be harboring some kind of secret. However, it had nothing to do with Yiguchen, so he didn't delve into it. The little fatty must have come to the treasure auction to look for treasures. At that moment, in the depths of the pavilion, there was a red curtain. A young girl in a golden dress walked out. It was Chu Huang. She saw Yiguchen at a glance. She immediately raised her eyebrows and her pretty face turned cold. "Yiguchen, how dare you appear here?" Chu Huang walked over and said coldly. "Oh, could it be that I can't even bring a friend?" "Then let's leave," Kenpo said lazily. Chu Huang's expression changed. At that moment, a soft and charming voice that made one's bones numb came out from the red curtain. "Chu Huang, don't be rude." Hearing this voice, Chu Huang immediately said respectfully, "Yes, Your Highness. I didn't expect that the sword son of the Sword Dynasty would travel here and participate in this small treasure auction." Feng Shi is flattered. "Ha, I'm just here to accompany this friend of mine. Princess Feng Shi, rumor has it that you're the #1 beauty in the Phoenix Dynasty. Why don't you show yourself?" Kenpo said with a lazy smile. "Hee hee," a coquettish voice rang out. Everyone was infected by this voice, and their bones felt a little soft. "This is a charm technique?" Yi Guqin was slightly surprised. Some women could use their voice, sight, and other means to affect one's mind and soul, making one fall for them. If one's divine soul was slightly weaker, one could even be directly controlled and become a puppet. This Princess Feng Shi, as a genius of a top dynasty, was indeed extraordinary. Among those present, only Yi Guqin, Kenpo, and Prince Xingli were not affected by Princess Feng Shi's voice. Even Yu Wenji and Duanmu Yu were a little dazed, revealing a faint infatuation on their faces. But what surprised Yi Guqin was that Little Fatty was not affected at all. As for Little Fatty's cultivation, Yi Guqin could not see through it. It was not that Little Fatty was powerful, but he was just like an ordinary person, with no aura leaking out. At that moment, the red curtain was pulled open. A beautiful young lady appeared before everyone's eyes. She was dressed in a red phoenix robe that was as bright as fire, outlining her hazy and graceful figure. Her skin was as smooth as jade, and her hair was casually draped over her shoulders like a waterfall, with a hint of laziness and seductiveness. Her appearance was also like that of a fairy, charming and alluring. But the most eye-catching thing was the flame-like phoenix mark between her eyebrows. It gave the young lady a mysterious and noble charm. This was also why she was extraordinary as a 7th-grade prodigy. "Everyone, I will remember this in my heart for coming to this small treasure auction. Next, everyone can trade here as you wish." Princess Feng Shi smiled sweetly and waved her hand. Some of the maids had set up tables where all the Sky Prides could exchange their items. "Of course, since I'm hosting this treasure auction, I naturally have to take out something decent." Princess Feng Shi clapped her hands again. Some maids of the Phoenix Nye dynasty once again set up many strange treasures, such as jade slips, rare quasi-saint medicines, elixirs, top-grade weapons, and so on. Yi Guqin's gaze suddenly froze. Because he saw a simple and dark stone among them. Ordinary people might not be able to sense anything special about this stone. But to Yi Guqin, who had cultivated the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra and had a perfected spiritual sea, this stone was like a magnet that attracted him. Chaos Essence Crystal. Chapter 678. Even with Yi Guqin's temperament, a glimmer of light flashed through his eyes. Of course, he didn't reveal any expression on his face. He had searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Yi Guqin didn't have much hope at first, but now he was pleasantly surprised. However, the primal chaos crystal was in Princess Feng Shi's hands. Yi Guqin knew that although he didn't have any interactions with Princess Feng Shi, Chu Huang still bore a grudge against him. Furthermore, with Princess Feng Shi's connections, it would be easy for her to find out about Yan Chang'e, Yan Wushuang, and the others. In Yi Guqin's opinion, Princess Feng Shi probably already knew about his relationship with Yan Wushuang and the others. Furthermore, Princess Feng Shi and Yan Wushuang had an old grudge. Princess Feng Shi was the daughter of Yan Wushuang's mother's murderer. It wouldn't be that easy to get something from Princess Feng Shi. Yi Guqin sighed at this thought. The atmosphere in the Morning Phoenix Pavilion heated up with the appearance of the treasures. Although the scale of the treasure auction wasn't comparable to the dynasty auction, the treasures displayed by the various prodigies weren't inferior to the dynasty auction. That little fatty also took out a pile of random treasures and began to yell and sell them. Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment before walking over to the primal chaos crystal. He didn't directly ask for the primal chaos crystal, but instead picked it up and took a look at the surrounding treasures. "How much are you selling these?" Yi Guqin looked at the maidservant of the Fengni dynasty standing beside the stage. The entire phoenix gazebo fell silent after hearing the words. Many strange gazes were directed at Yiguchen. Some of the prodigies found it funny. Did Yiguchen not know about the relationship between Chu Huang and Princess Fengxi? Yiguchen had offended Yiguchen at the auction. If it weren't for Kenpo, many people would have thought that Yiguchen wouldn't even be able to enter Chao Feng Pavilion. And now, they actually saw Yiguchen asking about the treasures of Phoenix Nie dynasty. What an ignorant person. Yu Wenji shook his head and smiled coldly. This Yiguchen really lost his mind. He actually dared to ask about the treasures of the Phoenix Nie dynasty. Not to mention Princess Phoenix Shi, even Chu Huang wouldn't give him a good face. Duanmu Yu crossed his arms, waiting to watch a good show. Ha, this Princess Feng she looks charming and gentle, smiling at everyone. But if you really think that she's an easy person to get along with, then you're wrong. Even if big brother Xinghong has always been pursuing her, he has never succeeded. Prince Xingli shook his head lightly. The Xinghong he spoke of was naturally the Skystar dynasty's crown prince Xinghong. Princess Feng she would keep her distance from Xinghong crown prince. Not to mention Yiguchen who had offended Chu Huang. Everyone looked like they were watching a show. Perhaps Princess Feng she would chase Yiguchen out of Chao Feng Pavilion in the next moment. Yiguchen, I didn't hear wrongly, right? You actually took a fancy to my Phoenix Nie dynasty's treasures. Chu Huang walked forward with a playful smile. She finally caught the opportunity. What she hated the most was Yiguchen's arrogance. He didn't put her in his eyes at all. Now, Yiguchen finally had a request, and he even took a fancy to the Phoenix Nie dynasty's treasures. This was undoubtedly a good opportunity to humiliate Yiguchen. Why? Isn't Princess Feng she holding this treasure auction to trade treasures? Why can't I ask? Yiguchen said indifferently. When Chu Huang heard that, she was so angry that she laughed instead. Yiguchen, are you really stupid or pretending to be stupid? Don't you know that you offended me at the dynasty's auction? Offended? Yiguchen raised his brows slightly. Let's not talk about whether it was offended or not. Even if it was, the word offended has nothing to do with a maidservant, right? Yiguchen said casually. As soon as he said that, the entire Chao Feng Pavilion fell completely silent. Some prodigies looked at Yiguchen in a daze. Didn't Yiguchen know that Chu Huang hated it when people called her a maidservant? Moreover, although Chu Huang and Princess Feng she were master and servant in name, they also had a trace of sisterly feelings. Yi. Gu. Chen, get out. Chu Huang was so angry that her face turned purple as she shouted coldly. Who has the right to chase out my friend? Kenpo flung his sleeves and said coldly. The atmosphere was a little solemn. However, Princess Feng Shi, who had been watching from the sidelines, glanced at Yiguchen with her watery eyes. She suddenly smiled and said, Chu Huang, you can leave now. But, Your Highness. Chu Huang bit her lips tightly, somewhat in disbelief. Princess Feng she actually asked her to leave. The surrounding Yu Wenji, Duanmu Yu, and even Prince Xingli had a strange look in their eyes. Why did it feel like Princess Feng she didn't have the intention to stand up for Chu Huang? Could it be because she was afraid of Kenpo? Everyone thought so in their hearts. However, Yiguchen felt Princess Feng she's gaze on his face. Young Master Yi, do you want these treasures? Princess Feng she's voice was soft and charming. Of course. May I know how you want to exchange them? Sky crystals or treasures? Yiguchen asked. Well. Princess Feng she's charming face suddenly revealed a flirtatious smile. She turned around like a bright and beautiful flame. In the next moment, she directly flashed in front of Yiguchen. Her beautiful face, which was as beautiful as a flower, stuck close to Yiguchen's eyes. A burst of fragrance came from her body. Her slightly opened red lips emitted a sweet and warm breath. As for the condition, how about you serve me in bed? As soon as her words fell, the entire place was dead silent. Shock, disbelief. Duanmuyu, Yu Wenji, and the others' eyeballs were about to pop out. Even Prince Xingli, who had always had an indifferent expression, had a slightly stiff expression. Serve her in bed? What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded, and their minds couldn't wrap their heads around it. The dignified number one beauty of the Phoenix dynasty, the 7th grade prodigy Princess Feng Shi, actually wanted a low-grade dynasty's prodigy to serve her in bed? How is this possible? Even Kenpo was stunned. He thought that Yi Guqin would have a conflict with Princess Feng Shi and was prepared to spar. In the end, Princess Feng Shi actually did this. On the other hand, that little fatty revealed an extremely envious expression. It's indeed a world that looks at faces. Why can't I encounter such a good thing? All in all, the entire morning wind house was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Gazes that were red with jealousy stared fixedly at Yi Guqin. What ability did this small dynasty's prodigy have to be able to obtain Princess Feng Shi's favor? However, as the person involved, Yi Guqin, looking at that charming face that was close to him with a smile, his eyes didn't waver at all. If it were any other man who was treated with such an ambiguous attitude, his soul would have flown out of his body and he would be unable to contain his joy. But who was Yi Guqin? He was the dignified sword demon, and his heart was as firm as a rock. He was completely unmoved. The most important thing was that Yi Guqin saw the depths of Princess Feng Shi's eyes. She didn't have the slightest bit of feeling that she was interested in him. There was only a kind of sick pleasure of revenge. Could it be that she wants to use me to take revenge on Yan Wushuang? Yi Guqin thought in his heart. Chapter 679. Yi Guqin naturally didn't think that Princess Feng Shi would be interested in him. Such a prodigy wouldn't be so superficial to judge a person based on appearance. What they were comparing was background, talent, strength, and cultivation. Yi Guqin knew his own talent and strength. But in the eyes of the prodigies of other dynasties, he was just a prodigy of a low-level dynasty with a 9th transformation divine soul. It was impossible for such an existence to enter Princess Feng Shi's eyes. The only possibility was that it had something to do with Yan Wushuang. Yi Guqin knew that Yan Chang'e had given up on marrying the eldest princess back then because he had fallen in love with Yan Wushuang's mother. Princess Feng Shi was the eldest princess back then, the daughter of the current empress of the Fengni dynasty. And Yi Guqin had come to the imperial capital with Yan Wushuang. So Yi Guqin somewhat understood that Princess Feng Shi had probably misunderstood his relationship with Yan Wushuang. She wanted to use him to take revenge on Yan Wushuang. Just like how Yan Wushuang's mother had taken Yan Chang'e away. But unfortunately, it was all a misunderstanding by Princess Feng Shi. Princess, you must be joking, Yi Guqin said indifferently. The moment he said that, the group of prodigies from the Chao Feng house heaved a sigh of relief. If Yi Guqin really agreed to Princess Feng Shi's request, Yi Guqin would probably immediately become a thorn in the side of Princess Feng Shi's pursuers. Moreover, no one was willing to see a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. A prodigy from a low-level dynasty had no other redeeming qualities other than his looks. He had no background and no strength. How could he be worthy of Princess Feng Shi's favor? Maybe Princess Feng Shi is just joking. Duanmuyu laughed dryly. Definitely so. After all, she's a girl that even big brother Xinghong wants to pursue. Prince Xingli shook his head. Princess, she's definitely just joking. Chu Huang wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and laughed dryly. He was really afraid that Princess Feng Shi had taken a fancy to this brat. Just when everyone thought that Princess Feng Shi was just joking, she opened her mouth again. She opened her mouth again and said in a gentle voice, "This princess is not joking, young Master Yi." Princess Phoenix Dawn's face got even closer to Yi Guqin's face. Fuck, that's too exciting. The little fatty covered his nose. If it were him, he would probably have a rush of blood to his head. The entire place fell into dead silence once again. Chu Huang's face turned slightly pale. Even Prince Xingli, who had made a solemn vow that Princess Fengxi was only joking, had his expression frozen as if he had been petrified. Princess Fengxi was actually speaking the truth. Red eyes filled with extreme jealousy locked onto Yi Guqin. They wanted nothing more than to replace him. Feeling the sweet breath, Yi Guqin quietly took a step back. His expression was calm as he said, "Sorry, this Yi is not interested in you." Once these words were spoken, the entire place fell into a deathly silence for the third time. Yi Guqin actually said that he wasn't interested in Princess Phoenix Dawn. One had to know that Princess Phoenix Dawn had the looks, the figure, and the background. She was even a 7th grade prodigy, the princess of a country, and the #1 beauty. Even Prince Xing Hung of the Sky Star dynasty had been pursuing her with perseverance. More importantly, if he could become partners with Princess Phoenix Dawn, then in the future, even if he couldn't rule the Phoenix Nye dynasty, he would at least have a great say in it. That was a top dynasty. In the face of so many benefits, Yi Guqin actually said that he wasn't interested. "Brother, you're amazing." The little fatty gave him a thumbs up. "Ha, as expected of a friend that I have taken a fancy to." Kenpo's tone was full of praise. Yi Guqin really couldn't resist Princess Phoenix Dawn's charm and casually became a subject under her skirt. Although Kenpo wouldn't treat him as a stranger, he would at least look down on Yi Guqin. Not only were the others stunned. Even Princess Phoenix Dawn's charming face froze slightly. Since young, this was the first time a man said that he wasn't interested in her. In the past, she could casually beckon a large group of prodigies to come and go as she pleased. Even Prince Xing Hung of the Sky Star dynasty, Princess Phoenix Dawn, didn't give a reply. And now, she took the initiative to ask Yi Guqin to sleep with her. Yi Guqin actually didn't like her. "Yi Guqin, you're too presumptuous." Chu Huang shouted coldly, but her eyes were filled with joy. The more Yi Guqin provoked Princess Phoenix Dawn, the happier Chu Huang was. "Chu Huang, you can leave," Princess Phoenix Dawn said indifferently. She narrowed her eyes slightly, and a faint coldness gathered in her eyes. She indeed didn't expect Yi Guqin to reject her. She originally thought that she could easily get Yi Guqin to take the bait and then torture Yan Wushuang. In the end, Yi Guqin wasn't moved at all. "Even so, it's a pity that I can't give these treasures to you." Princess Phoenix Dawn sighed regretfully. Yi Guqin's disappointed and aggrieved expression made the group of geniuses wish they could replace Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin secretly frowned. If that was the case, he wouldn't be able to get the Chaos Origin Crystal. But on second thought, Yi Guqin's eyes suddenly lit up. He suddenly said, "Princess Phoenix Dawn, your maidservant seems to have bought a Phoenix Blood Stone at the dynasty auction, right?" Princess Phoenix Dawn raised her brows. Why did Yi Guqin mention this? Chu Huang's face turned slightly pale. Yi Guqin didn't even call her by her name and directly called her maidservant. "So what?" Princess Phoenix Dawn said. "Princess, as a 7th grade prodigy, you have the immortal phoenix blood, and this phoenix blood stone is formed from a drop of phoenix blood," Yi Guqin said meaningfully. "What do you mean, Sir Yi?" Princess Phoenix Dawn asked. "Let me think. Princess must want to use the phoenix blood stone to cultivate some kind of martial art or cultivation technique. Such a martial art or cultivation technique might be very difficult to comprehend and cultivate. Even with the help of the Phoenix Blood Stone, the chances of success aren't high." Yi Guqin looked at Princess Phoenix Dawn's expression as he spoke. Sure enough, although Princess Phoenix Dawn didn't reveal any expression, her eyes flashed slightly. And then, Princess Phoenix Dawn suddenly revealed a charming smile and asked, "I'm willing to use this item as an exchange with Princess." Yi Guqin flipped his wrist and took out a branch from his origin ring. There were 7 to 8 leaves on the branch. Yu Wenji casually glanced at it and sneered. Is Yi Guqin really at his wit's end? What's the point of taking out a branch? Why do I feel that there's a vague Dao connotation permeating the air? Yeah, there's a feeling that makes one's state of mind clear. Could it be that Yiguchin took out a branch from the Enlightenment ancient tree? Some prodigies were slightly puzzled and their gazes suddenly froze on Yiguchin's hand. How is that possible? The Enlightenment ancient tree is a top-grade sacred herb. Yu Wenji was also shocked. It really is a branch from the Enlightenment ancient tree. Princess Phoenix Dawn's expression also changed. Such a rare top-grade sacred herb had never appeared even in her Phoenix Nye dynasty. Even if it was just a branch, its rarity surpassed ordinary sacred herbs. In her eyes, Yiguchin was just a prodigy from a small dynasty, but he actually took out a branch from the Enlightenment ancient tree. This made Princess Fengxi feel extremely surprised. Chapter 680. All the sky prides had their eyes fixed on the branch in Yiguchin's hand. A mysterious Tao aura emanated from the branch. Also, the surface of the leaves on the branches seemed to be faintly discernible with mysterious patterns. Why does Yiguchin have the Tree of Enlightenment? Could it be that he has a complete Tree of Enlightenment? How is that possible? A complete Tree of Enlightenment is so precious. It can only be found in the overlord forces. Many sky prides stared at the branch in Yiguchin's hand. Some of them were sky prides from the top dynasties. But even in the top dynasties, a complete Tree of Enlightenment had never appeared before. That was because such a top-grade sage herb had too many uses and was very rare. Oh, young Master Yi is actually able to take out a branch of the Enlightenment tree? Even Princess Fengxi's phoenix eyes were faintly burning with passion. Yiguchin's guess was not far from the truth. She had bid for the Phoenix Blood Stone because she needed to cultivate a special martial technique. Of course, that martial technique was very complicated. Even with Princess Phoenix's talent, it would be very difficult for her to cultivate it in a short time even with the help of the Phoenix Blood Stone. But with the help of the Tree of Enlightenment, it would be much easier to cultivate. Sensing Princess Phoenix's burning gaze, Yiguchin smiled. Yiguchen's expression was calm as he said, this branch of the Tree of Enlightenment was also obtained by chance. As for the complete Tree of Enlightenment, how could it appear? Yiguchin naturally would not leak any information about the Tree of Enlightenment. To a certain extent, the Tree of Enlightenment was far more attractive than the 5 Emperors Cosmos Sword Array and the incomplete Divine Emperor Sword technique. Because even an ordinary person would become a sky pride with the Tree of Enlightenment if they obtained it. Hee, I'm being too naive. Princess Phoenix, she covered her mouth and laughed. The other sky prides also shook their heads. They felt that it was only natural. How could Yiguchin have such a fortuitous opportunity to obtain a complete Tree of Enlightenment? Then what is Princess's decision? Yiguchin asked calmly. Princess Fengxi's face was full of smiles, but she was secretly grinding her teeth. She had always been the one controlling and toying with others. But now, she had a feeling that Yiguchin had seen through her and controlled her. However, the Tree of Enlightenment's branch was of great use to her. After weighing the pros and cons, Princess Fengxi said, of course. In this exchange, this princess is the one who has the advantage. Yiguchin casually extended his hand and said, let's have a pleasant transaction then. Seeing this, the surrounding people had a strange look on their faces. Did he really think that someone like Princess Fengxi would casually shake hands with others? However, before Yu Wenji could say anything, Duan Muyu and the others sneered. Under everyone's stupefied gaze, Princess Phoenix Dawn slowly extended her jade-like hand and shook Yiguchin's hand. Her sparkling jade-like hands were soft and boneless. It was very comfortable to touch. However, Yiguchin didn't have any other intentions. He was just happy that he had obtained the Chaos Origin Crystal. Princess Phoenix Dawn was a little more pleasing to the eye. Young Master Yi is really an interesting person. This princess's words still count. Princess Phoenix Dawn smiled charmingly like a seductive vixen. The surrounding people were so jealous that their eyes turned red. They wanted nothing more than to replace her. Yiguchin retracted his hand with a calm expression. Princess Phoenix Dawn pouted her red lips and said in a coquettish tone, young Master Yi really has a heart of stone. Her coquettish words made the surrounding prodigy's bones go soft. Yi Guchen was unmoved. Princess Feng she clenched her hands tightly when she saw Yi Guchen's stubbornness. After which, she inhaled a deep breath of air. Her full breasts rose and fell as she opened her mouth and said, "In that case, let's exchange." Then, Yi Guchen received those treasures. Princess Phoenix Dawn also obtained the Tao Comprehension Ancient Trees branch. Yi Guchen didn't feel the pinch. To him who possessed the complete Tao Comprehension Ancient Tree, that branch was really nothing. After obtaining the Chaos Origin Crystal, Yi Guchen had no intention of staying any longer. Kenpo didn't mind. He was here to accompany Yi Guchen in the first place. Little Fatty was also almost done with the exchange. After that, Yi Guchen and the other two left the Morning Wind brothel directly. Looking at the back view of Yi Guchen and the other two leaving, Princess Phoenix Dawn slowly let out a breath. A feeling called depression appeared in her heart. Today's treasure gathering will end here. Princess Phoenix Dawn flicked her sleeves and said, "Your Highness, can you wait a while more? We haven't finished the exchange yet," Duanmuyu said gently. "Yeah, Princess Phoenix Dawn, let them finish the exchange first," Prince Xingli said nonchalantly. If he opened his mouth, Princess Phoenix Dawn should listen. "However, I said that the treasure gathering will end." Princess Phoenix Dawn's tone turned cold. She turned around and returned to the red curtain. Looking at the temperamental Princess Phoenix Dawn, everyone kept quiet. Prince Xingli's face turned slightly ugly. Princess Phoenix Dawn didn't even give him any face. Once Yi Guchen left, the treasure gathering ended. The other Sky Prides felt as if they had been abandoned. Could it be that the entire treasure gathering was held for Yi Guchen alone? "Everyone, Her Highness has orders. Please return," Chu Huang said. "Humph. Is it because of that Yi Guchen? If I tell Brother Xinghong about this, I wonder what his attitude will be." Prince Xingli thought in his heart. He flicked his sleeves and left with a cold face. As the Sky Prides left, the Morning Wind brothel also quietened down. In the depths of the brothel, under Chu Huang's service, Princess Phoenix Dawn gently removed her clothes and bathed in the bucket. This was her habit. When she was in a bad mood, she would take a bath. Her wet, ink-black hair, coupled with her sparkling, translucent, and charming face, was hazy and seductive in the steaming mist. Her lithe and graceful jade body glowed with a jade-like luster. Princess Phoenix Dawn was expressionless. No one knew what she was thinking. Suddenly, she raised her lily-white hand and touched her beautiful face as she said to Chu Huang who was beside her. "Chu Huang, am I beautiful?" "Of course you are. Your Highness is the #1 beauty," Chu Huang said longingly. "But why is that Yi Guchen not bothered at all? I have already lowered myself to speak, but he is still indifferent." Princess Phoenix Dawn frowned coldly. "That's because he is blind," Chu Huang said mercilessly. "Ha, it has always been me toying with others. No one has ever toyed with me. This Yi Guchen is the first person to embarrass me." Princess Phoenix Dawn chuckled charmingly. "I originally only wanted to use him to torture Yan Wushuang. But now, I am more interested in Yi Guchen. He has to pay the price for toying with me." "Yi Guchen, you are the prey that I have my eyes on," Princess Fengxi muttered to herself as she licked her red lips with her pink tongue. Her phoenix eyes flashed with a cold and enchanting light. Chapter 681. Yi Guchen, who had already left Morning Wind Pavilion, naturally didn't know what Princess Fengxi was thinking. But even if he knew, he probably wouldn't do anything. Princess Fengxi wouldn't be a threat to him after he broke through the life and death realm. Even with Yi Guchen's divine soul 9th transformation cultivation, he could still make Princess Fengxi suffer if he used all his trump cards. "Ha, Brother Yi, you really aren't moved by beauty. Princess Phoenix, she is indeed a rare beauty. She has many suitors. If word of what happened at the Morning Phoenix brothel gets out, I'm afraid you'll be in trouble in the future, Saber 9 said with a smile, shaking his head. There will always be trouble. I'll just have to deal with it. Yiguchin smiled faintly. Now that he had obtained the Chaos Yuan crystal, the next step was to break through the soul calamity. At that time, Yiguchin's strength would skyrocket and he wouldn't need to be afraid of the other dynasty's sky prides. Sigh, this is really a superficial world. If it were me, I'm afraid Princess Feng she wouldn't say such words. Little Fatty sighed with a melancholy face. Oh right, why are you here? Yiguchin smiled and asked casually. Little Fatty glanced at Kenpo. Ha, I'm not listening. Kenpo waved his hand and walked to the side. Shoo, I'll only tell you about this. I'm not an ordinary person. Little Fatty said solemnly. And? Yiguchin found it a little funny. Actually, it's my master who asked me to stay in Saint Origin Dynasty and wait for the heavenly mandate. Little Fatty pretended to be serious. Who's your master? Yiguchin asked. My master is called Xingtiani. He comes and goes like a ghost, and has only appeared a few times. Little Fatty mumbled. As he spoke, he took out a piece of metal and started chewing on it. But there was one thing he didn't tell Yiguchin. His master, Xingtiani, also knew the myriad sword scripture. Xingtiani. Yiguchin raised his eyebrows slightly. Then, he saw Little Fatty gnawing on the treasured materials. What are you? Even Yiguchin's expression was somewhat interesting. This was the first time he had seen someone who could eat metal. I don't know why, but I just like to eat these things. Maybe it's because my teeth are good, Little Fatty said. Alright. Yiguchin nodded. This Little Fatty was indeed a little mysterious. The sword intent that was sealed in his body, his master Xingtiani, and the so-called Heaven's Will. These things were too bizarre. Yiguchin also had no clue. However, this was Little Fatty's secret. Yiguchin did not intend to find out. After that, Yiguchin and the others returned to the inn. Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, and the others were also worried. Seeing that Yiguchin had returned safely, he heaved a sigh of relief. What do you plan to do next? Yan Wushuang asked. Return to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest to cultivate in seclusion, Yiguchin said. He needed time to familiarize himself with the 5 Emperors' Cosmos Sword formation and break through his sea of consciousness. What about you guys? Yiguchin looked at Kenpo and Little Fatty. I'll probably stay in the Imperial capital for a while. However, I heard that you have a battle at the Forbidden City Summit. I'm looking forward to seeing your true strength, Brother Yi, Kenpo said with a smile. Then I have nothing to do. I'll follow you, Little Fatty said. Alright, then let's prepare and return to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest, Yiguchin said. Everyone nodded slightly. Don't disappoint me in the upcoming battle at the Forbidden City Summit, Prime Sovereign. There's also the preliminaries of the Prodigy battlefield. I must take first place. Only by joining an overlord force will I have the qualifications to compete with Gu Xiaoyang, Di Haotian, and the others. A sharp sword light flashed in Yiguchin's pitch-black eyes. Just as Yiguchin and the others were about to return home. In another underground space in the imperial capital. The roars of countless people, the smell of blood, and the fluctuation of true qi mixed together. This was an underground arena of life and death. It was a place where cultivators fought to the death. As long as they were in the arena, there was only life and death. There was no such thing as winning or losing. Every arena was mottled with blood and broken limbs. On one of the arenas, a young man with tattered clothes and wounds all over his body stood there in a daze. He looked ordinary, but there were countless wounds all over his body. His dirty clothes were soaked in dark red. His hair was messy like a bird's nest, and his body emitted an unpleasant smell of blood. He held a rusty ancient sword in his hand. As if it had killed too many people, the blade of the ancient saber had turned a dark blood red. In front of him was a great profound martial realm expert, who was clutching his chest as fresh blood gushed out from it. I lost. That great profound martial realm expert fell to the ground with a plop, dead. The entire life and death arena was deathly silent. Then, an earth-shaking uproar spread out in all directions. He won. Prime Sovereign Saber Maniac won. He killed 100 life and death experts in a row. Prime Sovereign is too terrifying. He killed 100 people in a row without stopping. Is he a monster? The faces of all the spectators were flushed red with excitement. Prime Sovereign Saber Maniac has broken the record of the arena of life and death, becoming the only 100-man slaughterer. A deacon of the arena of life and death shouted loudly. 100-man slaughterer. 100-man slaughterer. Endless clamor spread out like a tide. One must know that the arena of life and death was not a place like the sword arena. There was only life and death here. Losing a match meant death. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to set a winning streak in such a place. The previous highest record in the arena of life and death was only 47 consecutive victories. But Prime Sovereign was the only one to kill 100 people in a row and become the 100-man slaughterer. Among the crowd, a golden-robed man with a weathered face heaved a sigh of relief as a faint smile appeared on his face. Yiguchin set the record of 100 consecutive victories in the sword arena, and you set the record of 100-man slaughterer in the arena of life and death. Prime Sovereign, my disciple, you're indeed not weak. The golden-robed man was naturally the vice-palace master of the saber-sealing monarch palace, Imperial Saber Yubufan. There was a gratified look in his eyes. The result of the battle on the top of the Forbidden City might have been decided. However, there wasn't the slightest joy on Prime Sovereign's blood-stained face. 90%. Only 90%. The Peerless Blade hasn't reached perfection. How can I comprehend it to perfection? Prime Sovereign knelt on the ground, hugging the seven slaughter ancient saber as he howled in pain. With Prime Sovereign's talent in the saber Dao, he had managed to cultivate the Peerless Blade to 90% completion. But he was still a little lacking. Prime Sovereign could feel that if he could comprehend the Peerless Blade to perfection, the Peerless Blade would undergo a true qualitative change. The seven slaughter ancient saber would also undergo earth-shaking changes. His eyes were bloodshot. He would not rest until he fully comprehended the Peerless Blade. Yes, there's still one more person. Yiguchin, will he let me comprehend the Peerless Blade to perfection? Prime Sovereign muttered to himself as if he had grasped at the last straw. Yiguchin, don't let me down. Chapter 682. After tidying up for half a day, Yiguchin and the others left the imperial capital and began their journey back to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest. Yiguchin wanted to return to the Sword Sex Pagoda Forest for his final seclusion to prepare for the sword blade duel. All kinds of news were spreading within the imperial capital. Yiguchin's record of 100 consecutive victories in the sword battle hall had caused quite a stir. Now, the news of Guzun's 100 massacre in the life and death arena had caused an uproar. It was easy to determine victory and defeat in a battle between experts of the same level, but it was too difficult to determine life and death. Which expert in the life and death threshold didn't have one or two life-saving moves? And Guzun was able to create 100 massacre in the life and death arena. In everyone's eyes, it was obviously more valuable than Yiguchin's 100 consecutive victories in the sword battle hall. The sword battle hall only tested sword techniques, but the life and death arena was a true battle of life and death. Therefore, most people in the Saint Origin dynasty were optimistic about Guzun's victory in the sword sect and blade fanatics battle. As for Yiguchin, although he had created many miracles in the past, the biggest commotion he had recently caused was killing Zhou Tong, who was at the minor threshold realm. In everyone's eyes, this wasn't a big deal. Guzun had truly severed 100 life and death threshold realm. Of course, for the geniuses from the other dynasties, they didn't care about the sword blade duel at the Violet Forbidden Peak. Was there any suspense in a battle between a great threshold realm cultivator and a ninth transformation divine soul? However, compared to the violet forbidden peak, what attracted the attention of the geniuses from the other dynasties was what happened in the treasure tower. Princess Phoenix Dawn, who had a good reputation in the South Horizon region, was actually interested in Yiguchen. But the sword sect of this small dynasty had directly rejected her. This undoubtedly caused an uproar. Of course, there were also many Sky Prides who had feelings for Princess Phoenix Dawn. They instinctively disliked Yiguchen. Inside a luxurious building in the imperial capital, Prince Xingli, who was dressed in a starry robe, pushed open a door. Inside the room, a young man who resembled Prince Xingli but appeared more mature sat cross-legged on the bed. Behind the young man's head, there seemed to be a wheel of starlight. As it spun slowly, it emitted a powerful starlight energy. Big Brother Xinghong, your primary polarity star scripture has been cultivated to the point of perfection. Seeing this young man, Prince Xingli smiled faintly. This person was the Heavenly Star Dynasty's Xinghong Crown Prince, a proud son of heaven at the heaven and earth spirit bridge level. Crown Prince Xinghong slowly opened his eyes. In his eyes, there seemed to be an endless amount of starlight, appearing very mystical. My cultivation level is nothing compared to the elite disciples of Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Xinghong Crown Prince said indifferently. Big brother, why do you have to belittle yourself? Prince Xingli shook his head. Back then, grandfather was an elder of Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. He was expelled because he made a mistake. In the end, he established the Sky Star Dynasty alone. His only hope is to be able to make a great contribution and return to Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. As long as we do this, we will definitely let the Sky Star Dynasty return to Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Xinghong Crown Prince said. Hearing this, Prince Xingli frowned slightly and said, but this matter is too uncertain. Is this immemorial sword token really related to the famed ancient swords? In the South Horizon region, how long has it been since a famed ancient sword appeared? Prince Xingli still didn't quite believe that these mere sword tokens could be related to the legendary famed ancient swords. Even if there is only a 1 in 10,000 chance, we still have to fight for it. If our Sky Star Dynasty really obtains the famed ancient sword, as long as we hand it over to Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, we will be able to soar to the sky. Xinghong Crown Prince's eyes were burning with flames. Alright, I will think of a way to get the sword token of the Murong family. As for the sword token in Yiguchen's hand, it is a little troublesome. Prince Xingli shook his head. What happened? Xinghong Crown Prince frowned slightly. Prince Xingli simply told Xinghong Crown Prince about the dynasty's auction and what happened in the treasure auction. When he talked about the Sword Dynasty's Kenpo coming out to protect Yiguchen, Xinghong Crown Prince frowned slightly. But when Prince Xingli talked about how Princess Fengxi favored Yiguchen in the treasure auction, Xinghong Crown Prince's face suddenly became gloomy as a terrifying pressure spread out from the starry light wheel behind his head. As a great profound martial realm expert, Prince Xingli took a few steps back as he couldn't withstand Xinghong Crown Prince's pressure. You said that Fengxi will favor that Yiguchen? Xinghong Crown Prince's tone was deep. He had always been pursuing Princess Fengxi, and although Princess Fengxi didn't reject him, she also didn't agree. The reason why Xinghong Crown Prince pursued her was because of Princess Fengxi's outstanding beauty. No man wouldn't be moved. On the other hand, if he married Princess Fengxi, he would be able to control the power of the Phoenix Nye dynasty. At that time, when the Sky Star Dynasty and the Phoenix Nye dynasty joined forces, they would be extremely powerful. Even if they weren't comparable to the Sword Dynasty, they would at least be ranked in the top 10. This was Xinghong Crown Prince's ambition. All along, Princess Fengxi had never shown any goodwill to other men. Therefore, Xinghong Crown Prince had long treated Princess Fengxi as his exclusive property. But now, Princess Fengxi actually said something like serving Yiguchen in bed. Why are you angry, big brother? Didn't Yiguchen tactfully reject her? Prince Xingli said. Reject? Since he can make Feng Shi say something like that, then Yiguchen must die. Moreover, he also has an immemorial sword token. We can deal with them together. Xing Hong Crown Prince's eyes were cold. But there's Kenpo from the Sword Dynasty. Prince Xingli said hesitantly. There's always a way to kill someone. I believe that in the Saint Origin Dynasty, there are many people who want to see Yiguchen die. Isn't Prince Yuani one of them? Xing Hong Crown Prince sneered. Big brother is right. There will always be a chance. Prince Xingli also smiled. Even with Kenpo's protection, they still had to find a chance to kill Yiguchen. At this moment, Yiguchen still didn't know that Xing Hong Crown Prince already had the intention to kill him. A few days later, he returned to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest and began his seclusion. First, he practiced the 5 Emperors Cosmos sword formation again. Then, he sorted out the various sword techniques and practiced them several times. Finally, he needed to use the Chaos Origin Crystal to break through to the chaotic sea of consciousness. In the sealed pavilion, Yiguchen sat cross-legged on the ground alone. He held the dark Chaos Origin Crystal in his hand. This kind of mineral was too rare. It wasn't even recorded in the Heavenly Works mineral collection. If he didn't cultivate the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, Yiguchen wouldn't know that it was called the Chaos Origin Crystal. There's only one chance. If I can successfully pass it, I can cultivate the chaotic sea of consciousness. With the extreme sea of Qi, if I can break through the life and death threshold, my foundation won't be weaker than a heaven and earth spiritual bridge expert. Moreover, after cultivating the chaotic sea of consciousness, I can produce chaotic soul power. Maybe I can awaken Uncle Su's Yuan spirit. Yiguchen's eyes flickered with a determined light. No matter what, he must pass the soul tribulation. Chapter 683. Pitch-black flames spurted out from Yiguchen's palm. The demonic heart flame roasted the surface of the Chaos Origin Crystal. The Chaos Origin Crystal was not as hard as imagined. After being roasted for a while, it turned into a strange black liquid that exuded strong fluctuations of soul power. Ordinary people did not know what the Chaos Origin Crystal was used for. Even Yiguchen would not know how to use the Chaos Origin Crystal if he did not cultivate the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. Swallow this Chaos Origin liquid into your body. Then comes the most important thing. Yiguchen's eyes were deep and flickering with a dark light. This action did not seem to be harmless. In fact, it was more dangerous than the demonic heart flame burning the sea of consciousness. The sea of consciousness had 3 levels of soul tribulation: small perfection, great perfection, and chaos sea of consciousness. This last minor tribulation was the most terrifying. This Chaos Origin liquid had a special characteristic. The soul power it released could make one's soul consciousness seem to enter the chaos. If an analogy had to be made, it was like a lonely soul floating into the depths of the universe's chaos. There was no direction, no way out, and no end. This action was extremely dangerous. Because if one's soul consciousness could not return, the body that was left was equivalent to a living dead. Without consciousness, it was no different from being dead. Therefore, the last minor tribulation of the sea of consciousness was the most terrifying. As expected of the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra, the seemingly harmless step is the most dangerous step. Yiguchen shook his head and smiled faintly. However, there was no fear in his eyes. The 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra was the foundation of his strength. It allowed him to have a foundation that was far superior to others in all cultivation realms. Therefore, Yiguchen must continue cultivating the 9 Tribulations Heart Sutra. Without hesitation, Yiguchen opened his mouth and swallowed the Chaos Origin liquid. Then, he closed his eyes and calmed his mind. The next moment, all the essence of the Chaos Origin liquid poured into Yiguchen's sea of consciousness. Suddenly, Yiguchen opened his eyes. He was no longer in his own attic. Around him was a lonely void of the universe, as if it was the beginning of chaos. Up and down, left and right, front and back, he had no sense of direction. Primal chaos, sea of consciousness. Without experiencing primal chaos, how can one cultivate it? Yiguchen smiled faintly. If it were an ordinary person who encountered such a situation, they would probably be incomparably flustered. But Yiguchen's temperament was too tenacious. Faced with any predicament, he remained unperturbed. Yiguchen's expression was indifferent as he moved through the void. He knew that his physical body was still in the pavilion. However, his consciousness had already begun to cross the final soul tribulation in his sea of consciousness. If he could overcome it, Yiguchen would be able to cultivate his primal chaos sea of consciousness. It was unknown how much time had passed. Perhaps it was 2 hours, perhaps it was a day, perhaps it was a year. In the depths of the desolate primordial chaos, there was no concept of time. If an ordinary person was here, they would definitely be tortured to the point of insanity. Yiguchen, on the other hand, was expressionless. He placed his hands behind his back as if he didn't care at all. While Yiguchen was undergoing his tribulation, days passed in the outside world. Half a month later, Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, and the others gathered outside the pavilion where Yiguchen was in seclusion. There was a trace of anxiety on their faces. What's going on? Why is he in seclusion for so long? Yan Wushuang bit her lips. The silly kid doesn't allow outsiders to disturb him when he's cultivating. But this time, it's really been too long. Su Jianshi was also a little anxious. In the past, no matter how much he cultivated, he would at least come out once every 10 days or half a month. But this time, there was no movement at all. Could it be that he's suffering from qi deviation? Yan Xiaotang muttered. Yiguchen hadn't come out of seclusion for half a month. Many disciples of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest had come out of curiosity. Yan Xiaotang had also followed along. Shut your crow's mouth. The nearby Ji Ling said coldly. It's just a guess, Yan Xiaotang muttered. After being humiliated so many times, Yan Xiaotang had finally restrained himself. He wasn't as arrogant as before. I don't care anymore. Su Jianshi stomped her foot and entered the pavilion. The others, including Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Little Fatty, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, Yan Xiaotang, Yan Feiling, Shui, and even the Divine Eagle and Blackie, followed closely behind. However, when Su Jianshi saw Yiguchen sitting in the middle of the room, her heart tightened. Yiguchen's aura was almost dead. Silly kid, what's wrong? Su Jianshi approached Yiguchen, but she didn't dare to touch his body. Yan Wushuang's expression also changed. Everyone present could feel that Yiguchen was still alive, but he didn't have the slightest consciousness. It was as if he was a living corpse. He didn't notice their arrival at all. Could it be that he's really suffering from qi deviation? Yan Xiaotang was astonished. He had always disliked Yiguchen and said it casually. He didn't expect it to be true. Perhaps Brother Yi is cultivating a certain cultivation method or martial art and has sealed off his perception. Chu Qingqi was more rational and made a guess. With Yiguchen's talent, it shouldn't be possible for him to suffer from qi deviation. That might be the case. Miss Su, Shuang, don't worry. Junior Brother Yi is still alive, Ji Ling comforted. Su Jianshi and Yan Wushuang heaved a sigh of relief. However, they were still worried. After that, the crowd didn't say anything and quietly left the room. However, for some unknown reason, the news of Yiguchen's cultivation going berserk was leaked. Gradually, the news of Yiguchen's cultivation going berserk began to spread throughout the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Not only that, but the news also spread from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. 1 spread to 10, and 10 spread to 100. In addition, the sword and blade duel was about to begin at the peak of the Forbidden City. In an instant, the news spread like wildfire. 10 years ago, at the peak of the Forbidden City, the battle between the Sword King Feng Manlu and the Imperial Saber Yu Bufan. It could be said that the heavens and earth lost their color and the sun and moon dimmed. Hundreds of thousands of people in the Saint Origin dynasty surrounded the Forbidden City to watch the battle. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. Now, 10 years later, the sword and blade duel at the peak of the Forbidden City would naturally attract the attention of the entire dynasty. In addition, the location of the preliminaries of the Prodigy battlefield was also chosen at the Forbidden City. Therefore, the attention was even greater. Even some of the prodigies from the other dynasties knew about the duel at the peak of the Forbidden City. It was also because of this that the news of Yi Gu Chen's cultivation going berserk spread like wildfire in the prairie. As the successor of Feng Manlu, one could imagine the side of the sword and blade duel. Yi Gu Chen had cultivated to the point of qi deviation. Moreover, it happened at such a critical juncture. It would be a joke if the news spread. Because of this news, many forces in the Saint Origin Empire were in an uproar. Chapter 684. In a fragrant pavilion in the Lingxi Divine Palace. The sound of the zither was like pearls falling on a jade plate. A beautiful figure in a pink dress was playing the zither quietly. It was Zither Fairy. LV Qinghan, in a white dress, was leaning against the railing. Do you know that there is news that Yi Gu Chen's cultivation went berserk and he lost consciousness? LV Qinghan sighed. Yes. Zither Fairy's eyes were calm. Junior Sister Qin, this doesn't seem like your usual behavior. Aren't you worried about Yi Gu Chen at all? LV Qinghan asked with interest. It's because I believe in Mr. Yi that you don't think he will go mad. Plus, he will definitely win at the top of the Forbidden City. Oh, are you so sure? LV Qinghan smiled. Because Mr. Yi is a person who can create miracles. Zither Fairy frowned. Junior Sister Qin, are you really not going to participate in the preliminaries? LV Qinghan asked. No, it's good to play the zither every day and live a peaceful life. Zither Fairy smiled. LV Qinghan sighed deeply. It seemed that Zither Fairy had completely accepted it. Then, LV Qinghan left alone and began to prepare for the top of the Forbidden City. Mr. Yi, Zither Fairy will always bless you in her heart. Zither Fairy's fingers plucked the strings with a faint smile. At the Three Emperor Mountain where the three royal palaces were located. On a certain peak of the War Emperor Mountain, Qin Wentian was currently in a daze. A handsome and slender figure stood at the top of the mountain. He was wearing the 9 Serenities dragon armor. It was black and translucent, and it was engraved with extremely strong defensive arrays. His hair was as black as ink and his face was handsome, but with a hint of coldness, he looked like a god of war. He was the only remaining young war emperor of the 3 royal palaces. Yi Gu Chen, the 3 young emperors of the 3 imperial palaces were killed by you and I am the only one left. I have yet to avenge you. How can you cultivate to the point of going mad? In the Forbidden Violet Mountain, I, Yang Haotsang, will personally kill you with the Conqueror Halberd. With a twist of his wrist, the Overlord Halberd appeared in Yang Haotsang's hand. He slashed out with his halberd. A terrifying blade light sliced through the air, emitting a sharp whistle. On this day, Yang Haotsang and the other disciples of the 3 imperial palaces also left the 3 imperial mountain and prepared to head to the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Xingyuan Academy, inside a magnificent palace. Princess Yuan Shi, Mo Lengia, Fang Chen, and the others were all present. Ha, this is hilarious. That Yi Gu Chen actually went crazy from his cultivation. What a karma. Princess Yuan Shi was gloating over Yi Gu Chen's misfortune. She covered her mouth and giggled. I'm afraid that's just an excuse. Yi Gu Chen probably doesn't have the guts to fight Gu Zun. Mo Lengia curled his lips. Indeed, the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain is the peak of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. It is also the most eye-catching place. If Yi Gu Chen is defeated by Gu Zun, he will never be able to raise his head again. Fang Chen shook his head. At this moment, a figure dressed in luxurious golden robes stepped in. It was Prince Yuanyi. Greetings, Your Highness. Fang Chen, Mo Lengia, and the others cupped their hands. Elder brother, how are the preparations? Princess Yuanxi's face was surging with a vengeful cold light. Although rumor has it that Yi Guqin has gone mad, given his character, he will come to the Forbidden Violet Mountain even if he has only one breath left. I guarantee that as long as he comes to the Forbidden Violet Mountain, he won't be able to leave alive, even with Feng Manlu's protection. Prince Yuanyi sneered. Good, at least the hatred in my heart can be appeased. Princess Yuanxi revealed a pleased smile. The scene of Yi Guqin trampling on her during the exchange between the 7 major forces flashed in her mind from time to time. Only by killing Yi Guqin could she vent the hatred in her heart. Tianling Mountain, Wuji Sword Sect's encampment. In front of the Sun Moon Hall. Ha, this is so satisfying. That Yi Guqin has actually gone mad from his cultivation. What a joke. Yeah, with Yi Guqin here, our Wuji Sword Sect has always been suppressed. His identity as the barbarian tribe's young lord made the sect leader a little wary and did not dare to touch him. Now, he finally got his comeuppance. Many disciples of the Sun Moon Hall chatted with each other with smiles. I think he deserves it. In the crowd, a woman in a black dress sneered. She was Xian Dai of the Black and White Impermanence. Yi Guqin's cultivation has gone mad. I'm afraid his strength is half crippled. Now, he may not be a match for us. Another man in white, Xian Feng, said. Humph, at the exchange between the 7 major forces, we were only slightly weaker than Yi Guqin. Now, we can easily defeat him. Xian Dai said forcefully. Some of the disciples of the Sun Moon Hall looked embarrassed. They did not seem to be slightly weaker. Instead, they were beaten by Yi Guqin. Of course, they did not dare to say it out loud. However, at this moment, a cold voice sounded. What a joke. A young man in a black and white robe had his hands behind his back. His black and white hair fluttered as he walked. It was Xian Hao. Xian Hao, what do you mean? Xian Dai shouted coldly. A weakling who doesn't even dare to admit defeat. Xian Hao said coldly. Didn't you also lose to Yi Guqin? Xian Feng said with a frown. That's in the past. This time, I will personally go to the Forbidden Violet Mountain and fight with Yi Guqin. I will personally get rid of my inner demons. Xian Hao's eyes were surging with cold sword radiance. Yi Guqin has gone mad. You have taken advantage of him. Xian Dai's red lips curled up slightly as she smiled disdainfully. Gone mad. Ha, if he really did that, then he is not worthy of my sword. Xian Hao shook his head and turned to leave. Senior brother Xian Hao is finally going to fight again. Yeah, senior brother Xian Hao's strength is not the same as before. He must be able to avenge himself and defeat Yi Guqin. The entire Sun Moon Hall was in an uproar. Their top sky pride, Xian Hao, was going to fight again. In the Saber King Ancient Cave in the Saber King Palace. Gu Zun returned to the Saber King Ancient Cave for his final seclusion after killing 100 people in the arena of life and death. Yu Bufan stepped into the cave. Yu Bufan sighed when he saw Gu Zun staring blankly at the 7 Slaughter Ancient Saber. There's something I need to tell you. I heard that Yi Guqin's cultivation has gone berserk. It doesn't matter if he has gone mad, as long as he can help me comprehend the Peerless Saber. Gu Zun's palm brushed across the mottled body of the 7 Slaughter Ancient Saber. Some blood soaked the blade. A perfect Peerless Saber. Is that the only way left? Yu Bufan's eyes were filled with complicated emotions. But no matter what, Gu Zun must win this battle of sword and saber on the summit of the Forbidden City. Yu Bufan's obsession was as strong as Feng Manlu's. This was the clash between the Saber Dao and the Sword Dao. It was also the 10-year promise between the two. Time passed bit by bit. As the date of the Forbidden Violet Mountain approached, the news of Yi Guqin going mad never faded. Even the imperial capital, where sky prides from various dynasties gathered, the news of the Forbidden Violet Mountain and Yi Guqin's accident had spread. Chapter 685. Imperial Capital, Morning Phoenix Pavilion. Oh. Then Yiguchen's cultivation has gone berserk? On the red bed, Princess Feng Shi was lazily lying on her side. Her slender snow-white legs were crossed in a graceful arc. That's right. I heard that he's going to have a sword and saber duel with Prime Sovereign, but I never expected that he would go berserk. It's truly retribution. At the edge of the bed, Chu Huang had a gloating expression. She hated Yiguchen to the core. Yiguchen was arrogant and didn't know his place. He even dared to disregard Princess Phoenix Dawn, which made Chu Huang loathe him. Although I know that Yiguchen's cultivation is only at the 9 Changes Divine Soul Realm, it's too disappointing if he's so weak that he can go berserk. Princess Phoenix Dawn shook her head. Yiguchen was the first person who had put her on the spot and humiliated her. If Yiguchen's performance was really that bad, Princess Phoenix Dawn would also be a little disappointed. It wasn't easy for her to have any interest in a man. If Yiguchen was really that bad, Princess Phoenix Dawn would also give up. After all, this wasn't the only way to torture Yan Wushuang. Then will your highness be going to the sword and saber duel? Asked Chu Huang. She actually hoped that Princess Phoenix Dawn would go. Her goal was naturally to see Yiguchen's miserable appearance with her own eyes. Why wouldn't I go? The qualifiers are also in the Forbidden Violet Mountain. It's just on the way. Princess Phoenix Dawn stretched out her slender fingers and twirled a strand of hair. Yiguchen, I've already gone personally. Don't disappoint me. Princess Feng Shi narrowed her eyes and muttered to herself. In another part of the imperial capital, in a luxurious pavilion. Big brother, this is really interesting. Yiguchen actually went berserk. Prince Xingli couldn't help laughing. Ha, he's just a genius from a small dynasty. It's normal for him to have such an unbearable performance. Crown Prince Xingli shook his head and laughed. But if that's the case, will Yiguchen head to the Forbidden Violet Mountain? Prince Xingli frowned slightly. No matter what, he is someone I must get rid of. When the time comes, let's head to the Forbidden Violet Mountain to take a look. If he doesn't come, he can still live for a few more days. If he really dares to come, then let him die at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. A cold light flashed in Crown Prince Xinghong's eyes. Regardless of whether it was Princess Fengshi's favor or the existence of the immemorial sword token. In the eyes of the Xinghong Crown Prince, Yiguchen was already a dead man. Furthermore, someone from the Saint Origin dynasty had already contacted him. In the Forbidden Purple Mountain, there would be a huge killing trap waiting for Yiguchen's arrival. No matter what the final outcome of the battle between sword and saber was, Yiguchen would die. This time, no one could protect him. In a tall building in the imperial capital, Kenpo stood alone by the railing with a mask on his face. With a sigh, he floated to the ground. Brother Yi, did you really cultivate to the point of chi deviation? Kenpo let out a long sigh. In fact, he did not believe that Yiguchen would cultivate to the point of chi deviation. This was because he had personally experienced Yiguchen's sword skill. How could someone who could cultivate such a flawless sword skill possibly suffer from chi deviation? I still don't believe it. Brother Yi, at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain, I will personally witness your strength with my own eyes. Kenpo's feet flashed and his figure blurred before he disappeared. He was also preparing to head to the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. As time passed, 2 major events began to ferment and attracted the attention of the entire Saint Origin dynasty. The first was naturally the preliminaries of the Battle of Prodigies. This was the Battle of Prodigies of the 100 Great Dynasties in the South Horizon region. It was also the only chance to enter the eyes of the Overlord forces. If one couldn't even pass the preliminaries, then there was no need to mention about participating in the Battle of Prodigies. The other event was the battle between sword and saber at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. The battle 10 years ago could be said to have attracted the attention of the entire Saint Origin dynasty. 10 years later, the flames of war rose once again, and the attention it attracted wasn't just limited to the dynasty. The various great dynasties' heaven's prides that had gathered in the imperial capital were also interested. Hey, have you guys heard that there will be a battle between sword and saber at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain? What's so interesting about that? It's just a battle between two heaven's prides from a low-grade dynasty. You can't say that. That saber maniac Guzun is quite capable. I heard that he has killed hundreds of life and death realm experts. I'm afraid his strength isn't much weaker than the heaven's prides from a high-grade dynasty. That's right. That Guzun is quite capable. But in comparison, Yi Guqin, who is known as the Sword Master, is somewhat unbearable. Not to mention that he only has the 9 transformations of the Divine Soul, he has even cultivated to the point of Qi deviation. TSK, what a joke. That Yi Guqin even rejected Princess Fengxi's favor in the Morning Wind Pavilion. He's just an attention-seeking clown. What can a mere 9 transformation Divine Soul do? Then I really want to see the battle at the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. I want to see how miserable that Yi Guqin is going to be. Ha, I'll go too. It's quite fun to watch weaklings pecking each other. In the imperial capital, many heaven's prides from other dynasties were discussing this matter. But most of them had a condescending look on their faces. It was as if they were watching a battle between juniors. Even the jokes about weaklings pecking each other were spread out. Ha, let's go to the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Let's see how miserable that Yi Guqin is going to be. Great Yu Dynasty's young Prince Yu Wenji laughed and prepared to head to the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain. Yi Guqin, I want to see your miserable defeat with my own eyes. Duanmu Yu sneered and prepared to leave as well. There was also Dark Nether Dynasty's Ku Mo Vermilion Bird Dynasty's K Ling, Golden Sun Dynasty's Prince Jiaoyi. Dark Witch Dynasty's Gui Qiluo. They all headed to the top of the Forbidden Violet Mountain to watch a good show of weaklings pecking each other. At the same time, outside the Saint Origin Dynasty. Above the sky, a floating airship was flying across the void. On the surface of the airship, there was a pattern of a heavenly saber. On the deck of the airship, a young man was standing. The man was tall and his long white hair was fluttering in the wind. On his back, there was a crystal-clear long saber that was emitting a piercingly cold saber chi. With white hair and white clothes, he stood with his hands behind his back. His clothes were fluttering in the wind. Beside the white-haired man, a servant said, "Master, the Saint Origin Dynasty is just the location of the Heaven's Pride's battlefield. Why do you have to come here personally?" "Ha, if it's just a preliminary battle, I won't bother coming here. I'm here for the inheritance left behind by the 7 Kills Saber Saint in the Saint Origin Dynasty." The white-haired man said. "What? The inheritance of the 7 Kills Saber Saint is in the small Saint Origin Dynasty?" The attendant turned pale with fright as he spoke. "It's not a secret. Many people in the sect know about it." The white-haired man smiled faintly. "Since you already know about it, why don't you just take the inheritance of the 7 Kills Saber Saint and let it wander in the Saint Origin Dynasty?" The servant was puzzled. He knew that the white-haired man in front of him had a high status in the sect. Not only that, but he was also famous among the younger generation in the entire South Sky region. Because the white-haired man was one of the top 10 masters in the South Sky region. Chapter 686. If I can get it, I won't let it go. However, the inheritance of the 7 Slaughter Saber Saint is not something that anyone can get. The white-haired man shook his head and sighed. "Could it be that you can't get the inheritance of the 7 Slaughter Saber Saint with your talent and strength?" The servant asked. The 7 Slaughter Saber Saint is a genius and a madman. His inheritance is not something that ordinary people can get. It's impossible to get the true inheritance unless it's fated. The white-haired man sighed. "What do you mean?" The servant was confused. The 7 Slaughter Saber Saint once said that only a madman like him who has the 7 Slaughter birth chart can get his inheritance. Unfortunately, I'm not a madman and I don't have the 7 Slaughter birth chart. Therefore, I'm not fated to get his inheritance. The white-haired man sighed. That's a pity. No one can get the inheritance of the 7 slaughter saber saint. The servant also felt that it was a pity. Therefore, I'm going to the Saint Origin dynasty to see if anyone can get the inheritance of the 7 slaughter saber saint. If there is, that person will definitely shock the entire South Sky region in the future. The white-haired man sighed. Even if someone can get the inheritance of the 7 slaughter saber saint, can he be stronger than young master? The servant disagreed. His young master was one of the top 10 young masters in the South Sky region. He was a peerless genius with extraordinary strength. Oh, that's because you don't know how terrifying the 7 slaughter saber saint was back then. The 7 slaughter saber technique was a peerless saber that made the heavens and earth go silent. Among the saints, his attack was the best. The white-haired man praised. It's so terrifying. The servant shrunk his head. Even so, the inheritance of the 7 slaughter saber saint is not something that ordinary people can comprehend. This trip might be in vain again. The white-haired man said faintly. This time, he might return in vain again. In the inner courtyard of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. This is so hateful. The news of junior brother Ye's cultivation going berserk has spread throughout the entire dynasty. Ji Ling's face turned ugly. Only we know who it was that spread the news. Yen Wushuang frowned. That's right. Suddenly, she looked at Yen Xiaotang. Yen Xiaotang's expression froze a little. He avoided her gaze and said, "Cousin, why are you staring at me like that?" "It's you." Yen Wushuang's pretty face turned cold. The rest of the people present, including Chu Qingqi, Yi Xia, Little Fatty, and the rest, all turned their gazes towards Yen Xiaotang. I just casually told a few people. Who knew that they would spread it out? Yen Xiaotang's voice was a little dry as he explained. Get out. Yen Wushuang gritted her teeth and said with a murderous look on her face. You guys better take good care of that Yiguchen. If he can't participate in the Forbidden Violet Summit, his reputation will be completely ruined. Yen Xiaotang said forcefully. After that, he didn't dare to stay and left dejectedly. Damn it. Yen Wushuang's face turned ashen. She really hated this cousin of hers. Sigh, now this news has spread throughout the entire dynasty. There are even geniuses from other dynasties who are saying that it's just noobs pecking at each other. Chu Qingqi sighed helplessly. What a bunch of arrogant geniuses. Do they really look down on others? Yi Xia curled his lips. The most important thing now is that senior brother Yi can't wake up. The battle at the Forbidden Violet Summit is very close. Chu Qingqi frowned. Yen Wushuang sighed deeply and glanced at the silent Su Jianshi. Miss Su, you know Yiguchen. Is his condition normal? Yen Wushuang asked. She was really worried. I don't know either. But I believe in the silly kid. He definitely won't disappoint. Although Su Jianshi was also hesitant and uneasy, she still chose to believe in Yiguchen. Just as everyone was worried about Yiguchen. In the pavilion where Yiguchen was in seclusion, Yiguchen's physical body seemed to be in a state of stillness. He only maintained a basic vitality. Yiguchen's consciousness was still deep in the chaos. How long has it been? Looking at the chaos around him, Yiguchen sighed. He didn't know how long he had been trapped here. It was as if there was no end to this space. If it was an ordinary person, their mind would have collapsed and their consciousness would have collapsed. As expected of the spiritual sea-soul tribulation. Although the last tribulation doesn't have any bone-piercing pain, it's more terrifying than the physical torture. Yiguchen couldn't help but sigh. His previous tribulations were all physical pain, burning his body, his sea of consciousness, and so on. But this last tribulation didn't have any pain, but it was more dangerous than any of the previous tribulations. If his consciousness wasn't strong enough, he would directly collapse. But Yiguchen, must overcome this tribulation. Yiguchen's eyes were bright as he continued to walk forward. After an unknown period of time, Yiguchen's footsteps suddenly stopped. This was because a figure had appeared in the darkness and chaos in front of him. It was a lonely figure. When Yiguchen saw the figure, his eyes suddenly shook. Could it be? Yiguchen stared at the back of the figure. The figure slowly turned around. It was a middle-aged man, dressed in a black robe, with a handsome face, as if carved by a knife and chiseled by an axe, with a sense of vicissitudes. With his hands behind his back, he was alone, like a sharp sword piercing the sky. This person was not someone else. It was Yiguchen. No, to be precise, it should be the sword demon of his previous life. Duguwubai. Oh, the spiritual sea soul tribulation, the last tribulation is actually myself? Yiguchen shook his head and sighed. Duguwubai's eyes looked at Yiguchen. Their eyes met. You're here. Duguwubai said. Yiguchen was silent. To be precise, it should be me who's back. Duguwubai said lightly. Is this the last tribulation? Yiguchen shook his head and smiled. Tribulation, wrong. This is not a tribulation, but an awakening. Duguwubai sighed. What do you mean? Yiguchen asked. Actually, there has never been a Yiguchen, only a Duguwubai. Duguwubai said. There had never been a Yiguchen. There was only a Duguwubai. Yiguchen's eyes shook as he stared at the Duguwubai opposite him. What do you mean? Yiguchen asked. Back then, I used the selfless sword Dao to fight against the heavenly tribulation and tried to shatter the void. In the end, I failed and fell, but my consciousness and obsession remained. And in my consciousness, you appeared, Yiguchen. All the memories belonging to Yiguchen are fake, including the so-called Saint Origin Dynasty, South Horizon region, and this world. They are all fake. Yiguchen is just a dream. Only the Duguwubai is real. Duguwubai's voice resounded throughout the chaotic void. Yiguchen's body shook. He was fake. To be precise, you are me. There has always been only a Duguwubai, no Yiguchen. Duguwubai looked deeply at Yiguchen. Ha, ha ha, ha ha ha. Yiguchen suddenly looked up and laughed. This was the first time he had lost his composure. Everything he had experienced was fake. There had never been a Yiguchen. There was only the sword demon, Duguwubai, who had failed the heavenly tribulation. Su Jianshi risking her life to block the sword for him was fake. Situ Hongxue bit him on the shoulder. That painful feeling was fake. Feng Manlu unsheathed his divine sword and suppressed the world for him was fake. Zither Fairy, Mu Xingzu, Chu Qingqi, Ji Ling, Yi Xia, everyone was fake. Even Yiguchen himself was fake. This, how laughable. This tribulation is really terrifying. Yiguchen laughed. This was simply shaking his Dao heart. Sigh, you have yet to wake up. Come back and become the real sword demon, Duguwubai. Erase the fake memories belonging to Yiguchen. Duguwubai said bewitchingly. Erase Yiguchen's memories? Yiguchen sneered. If that was true, wouldn't he become a mindless zombie? Chapter 687. He was certain that if he chose to believe in Duguwubai in front of him, then, Yiguchen's own consciousness would be erased. He would truly become a dead man without consciousness. What's wrong? Don't tell me you're still going about things the wrong way. You're me, so why haven't you come back yet? Do you think I'll be shaken by this? Wrong. You don't understand what the sword master is, Yiguchen. You don't understand what the sword demon is, Duguwubai. Yiguchen looked up to the sky and let out a long howl. His black hair fluttered in the wind. So what if you're Yiguchen? So what if you're Duguwubai? Do you know the story of Zhuang Zhou dreaming of butterflies? It doesn't matter if it's Zhuang Zhou dreaming of butterflies or butterflies dreaming of Zhuang Zhou. Because I'm the sword master, Yi Guqin. I'm also the sword demon, Dugu Wu Bai. Yi Guqin's words echoed throughout the chaotic void. He was the sword master. He was also the sword demon. No illusions can shake my heart to stand at the peak of the sword Tao. So, break through this calamity. Yi Guqin raised his hand as his true qi turned into sword qi. One sword cut through the chaos and opened up the light. Heh! As expected of me, the Dugu Wu Bai, on the other side smiled faintly, and his figure was destroyed by Yi Guqin's sword. In an instant, the chaos shattered and the void trembled. In the next moment. In the room, Yi Guqin's body, which had been silent for more than half a month, suddenly trembled. Then, an incomparably terrifying soul ripple swept out like a 10,000-foot-tall wave. The entire building rumbled and shook under this spiritual fluctuation. What's going on? What's going on? Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, and the others had been waiting in another pavilion on the fifth peak. Everyone was alarmed when they felt the abnormally powerful soul fluctuation. Su Jianshi's expression suddenly changed, revealing a look of extreme joy. It's that silly boy. He must have woken up. What? Junior Marshal Brother Yi has awakened. Let's go and take a look. Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Little Fatty, and the others stood up and headed towards Yi Guqin's pavilion. What a terrifying soul fluctuation. Before they even reached the pavilion, everyone exclaimed in surprise. That soul fluctuation caused them to be incomparably shocked. What kind of soul technique is Senior Brother Yi cultivating? Chu Qingqi sighed. Then, everyone entered the pavilion. Around Yi Guqin, the vigorous soul fluctuation seemed to distort the air. A strong vitality surged out of Yi Guqin's body. Su Jianshi and the others watched nervously. At a certain moment, Yi Guqin abruptly opened his eyes. His eyes were pitch black and deep, as if they contained a world of primal chaos. The moment he opened his eyes, a wave of primal chaos soul power swept out in all directions. This terrifying soul power even rushed out of the fifth peak and spread throughout the Sword Whisper mountain range. Heavens, what's going on? What kind of soul fluctuation is this? Is it the sect master, Lord Feng Manlu, or Elder Qiu Shan? In the Sword Whisper mountain range, all the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were extremely shocked. That powerful spiritual pressure was like the might of the heavens, causing their sea of consciousness to feel as though it was being suppressed. In their minds, only Feng Manlu and the other two sovereigns would be able to emit such a soul suppression. No, that's not right. That fluctuation is coming from the fifth peak. The fifth peak is where Senior Brother Yi secludes himself. Could it be that Senior Brother Yi has awakened? All the disciples were extremely shocked. Then, there were countless sounds of wind being torn apart. One figure after another swiftly flashed towards peak number 5. At the top of the Sword Sect Pagoda, Feng Manlu stood with his hands behind his back. Although his eyes were empty, there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Yi Guqin, I know that you won't disappoint me. Feng Manlu had never believed the news of the so-called qi deviation. Now, Yi Guqin, who had been dormant for a long time, had finally returned. After the transformation, Yi Guqin would be extremely powerful. Feng Manlu was looking forward to it. In the pavilion of the fifth peak, Yi Guqin opened his eyes. His gaze was extremely deep. The soul tribulation in his consciousness had finally been completely passed. At this moment, in his mind, the entire consciousness seemed to have turned into chaos. The vigorous primal chaos soul power was rotating in it. Even the meteorite demonic butterfly had a third star spot on its wings because of Yi Guqin's transformation. The meteorite demonic butterfly had also become stronger. Most importantly, Yi Guqin had cultivated the chaotic sea of consciousness. He estimated that the chaotic sea of consciousness was more than 100 times stronger than an ordinary sea of consciousness. It had a suppressive effect on most other seas of consciousness. Yiguchen's divine soul's perception range had also expanded to more than 10,000 feet. His soul fluctuation could now cover the entire Sword Whisper Mountain range. How powerful was that? Moreover, the chaotic sea of consciousness had other uses that Yiguchen needed time to digest. Silly boy, sob, I was so worried. Seeing that Yiguchen had awakened, Su Jianshi couldn't help but hug Yiguchen's body. She didn't care that everyone was looking at her. Tears flowed down her face. Although she trusted Yiguchen, it was impossible to say that she wasn't worried. During this time, Su Jianshi couldn't even sleep well. I'm sorry for making you worry. Yiguchen patted Su Jianshi's back comfortingly. Seeing this, Yan Wushuang felt bitter. Su Jianshi could hug Yiguchen without any scruples. But she couldn't. Junior brother Yi, you're finally awake. During this time, everyone was very worried about you. Shuang, couldn't even eat. Ji Ling couldn't help but say. Yiguchen nodded faintly. Sorry for making everyone worry. Brother Yi, why do I feel a sense of oppression in my sea of consciousness? Your soul power is too terrifying, Chu Qingqi said. When Yiguchen had opened his eyes, the soul power fluctuations that had been released had made him feel dizzy. Ha, just a little bit of success. Yiguchen smiled faintly. Brother Yi, you don't know this, but while you were cultivating, there were rumors going around saying that you suffered from qi deviation while cultivating, little fatty said. Qi deviation? Yiguchen laughed. This kind of rumor was extremely laughable. At this moment, outside Yiguchen's pavilion, the sound of wind breaking rang out one after another. Yiguchen left the pavilion and the rest of the people followed him. As soon as he walked outside, he was slightly stunned. There was a black mass of people outside the pavilion. They were all inner court disciples. Senior brother Yi is out. It really is senior brother Yi. He really didn't suffer qi deviation. Which bastard spread those rumors? What a cheap mouth. Some inner court disciples cursed fiercely. In the crowd, Yan Xiaotang's face was stiff, alternating between green and white. But what made his expression even more stiff was that Yiguchen had actually awakened. Not only that, but the terrifying soul fluctuation just now was even more shocking. How is that possible? Not only did Yiguchen wake up, but he also seems to have improved greatly. Yan Xiaotang's expression was extremely ugly. Senior brother Yi, you've finally come out of seclusion. The outside world is looking down on senior brother Yi now, and even slandering him for not daring to fight Gu Zun. Yeah, even our sword sect pagoda forest is being mocked by others. How hateful. These days, the outside world's rumors had also affected the sword sect pagoda forest. The sword sect pagoda forest disciples were mocked outside. Many of them were extremely sullen. In their hearts, the sword sect was an indomitable spirit. How could it be slandered and humiliated like this? Everyone. Yiguchen said indifferently with his hands behind his back. As soon as he said this, all the disciples fell silent. Don't care about the criticism of others. True strength comes from oneself. I, Yiguchen, will go to the Forbidden City's peak this time. I will shake the world with the sharpness of my sword and suppress all who refuse to obey me. Yiguchen looked at the sky coldly, looking disdainfully at the firmament. He was like a sharp sword that pierced the heavens. He would go to the Forbidden City's peak this time to suppress all who refused to obey him. Chapter 688. The disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest felt their blood boiling. It was a passion that came from their bones. The unparalleled Sword Sect's Yiguchen in their hearts. He had killed Xia Yubing in the 10 Prefectures elite meeting. He had dared to attack Gu Xiaoyang, one of the 10 princes of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. In the battle of the inner sect, he had summoned 10,000 swords with a single word. In the sword cliff, he had left behind an immortal sword mark with a single strike. In the void sword realm, he had killed 100 people with a single strike. He had defeated all the prodigies of the major factions. In the battle of the barbarian race, he had turned into the Five-Crown King and destroyed Tuoba Shang's scheme with the 6 Dao Ashura sword array. In the northern Liang city, he had become the young king of the barbarian race and made everyone submit. Even Xian Wuji, the battle emperor, and the Yuan master had submitted to him. If an ordinary person could do one of these things, they would be famous everywhere. And all these miracles were created by Yi Guqin alone. Senior Brother Yi. Senior Brother Yi. All the inner sect disciples shouted. Yi Guqin was the synonym of miracles in their hearts. Su Jianshi and the others were also affected. Their eyes turned red. How many days are left before the peak of the Forbidden City? Yi Guqin asked calmly. 3 days, Chu Qingqi said. 3 days? I'm afraid that the summit of the Forbidden City is not that simple. Yi Guqin thought secretly. He should make some preparations. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Because the time was too short, the news of Yi Guqin's awakening hadn't spread out from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Everyone thought that Yi Guqin was still in a state of qi deviation. Because of this, the battle at the Violet Forbidden City's peak was inevitable. Everyone thought that the outcome was already decided. Finally, the third day arrived. The light of the celestial arch sword pierced through the clouds and shone down. The entire Saint Origin dynasty was like a giant that had just woken up. Rumbling noises resounded throughout the land. Today was the day of the battle between the sword and the saber at the Violet Forbidden City's peak. 10 years ago, the battle between Sword King Feng Manlu and Imperial Saber Yu Bufan was a classic. Even until today, the legend of that day was still being spread throughout the Saint Origin dynasty. However, it was a pity that Feng Manlu was ambushed by a mysterious person and his spiritual palace was destroyed, causing his cultivation to drop. After that, he and Yu Bufan never fought again. However, they had agreed to find a successor within 10 years before engaging in a duel between sword and saber. Sword King and Saber Emperor were both famous experts in the Saint Origin dynasty. The Sword Sect's saber fanatic was also a prodigy whose name resounded throughout the dynasty. One could only imagine how much attention this battle would attract. In addition, the prodigy battlefield qualifiers were held at the same location. This battle attracted the interest of the prodigies from the other dynasties. At this moment, if one were to look down from the sky, one would see that the entire Saint Origin dynasty was swarming towards the Forbidden Violet Mountain. The Forbidden Violet Mountain was the center of the entire Saint Origin dynasty. Inside the encampment of the sealed Saber King Palace, Yu Bufan stood with his hands behind his back. Beside him, Prime Sovereign Saber Addict was still in a daze. The only difference was that Gu Zun was surrounded by a terrifying saber intent. It was a terrifying power that seemed to be able to slash the heavens and massacre the world. Aside from that, the palace master of the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace had also appeared. Demonic Saber Leng Ju, Demonic Saber Nya Ling, and Blood Saber Mo Juechen were also present. There were also tens of thousands of disciples from the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace. More than 80% of the people from the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace had gathered here. Are you confident in this battle? The palace master of the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace asked. This duel between sword and saber wasn't just about Yi Guqin and Prime Sovereign. It wasn't just about the duel between Feng Manlu and Yu Bufan. It was about the Sword Sect's Tower Forest and the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace. In other words, it was a duel between the Saber Dao and the Sword Dao. Relax, Prime Sovereign isn't weaker than anyone. Yu Bufan smiled faintly. His strong confidence was about to burst out. Because Prime Sovereign was too outstanding. Prime Sovereign, what do you think? The palace master of the bestowed Saber Monarch Palace asked. No one can stop the saber of 7 kills. Prime Sovereign's voice was hoarse and he sounded a little dazed, but his words were filled with killing intent. Alright, let's go. The palace master of the bestowed saber monarch palace waved his hand and everyone moved. Almost at the same time, the Limitless Sword Sect, the 3 imperial palaces, the 9 Profound Sect, the Rhino Divine Palace, and the Saint Origin Institute. Almost all the major sects and super families had left for the Forbidden Purple Mountain. The Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, in front of the Sword Whisper Mountain Range. There was a sea of people as far as the eye could see. The entire Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest, including the inner and outer courtyards, was gathered here except for a few elders. Yi Guqin was dressed in a black robe. He was handsome and had a calm expression. There wasn't any sharp aura around him, but it felt like he had returned to his original state. Su Jianshi, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the little fatty stood beside him. The Divine Eagle and Blackie were also by his side. Feng Manlu, Yan Chang'e, and Qiu Shan were also present. Yan Bailan, Yan Xiaotang, and Yan Feiling were also present. Yi Guqin, I'm afraid the sword and saber duel won't be that simple, Feng Manlu said faintly. Of course I know. Yi Guqin was well aware of this. Manlu, the knot in your heart can be untied after the promise of 10 years. Yan Chang'e sighed. I believe that Yi Guqin won't disappoint me. Feng Manlu smiled gently. Alright, let's go then. Yan Chang'e smiled. Wait, Yi Guqin suddenly said. Everyone was slightly taken aback, including Yan Chang'e. Why did Yi Guqin ask them to wait? Could it be that he's scared? Yan Xiaotang muttered softly. Yi Guqin suddenly stomped the ground with one foot. A terrifying sword essence, accompanied by a vigorous soul fluctuation, spread out and covered the swordsmanship-seeking mountain range. This. Senior Brother Yi, what are you doing? As the fluctuation spread out, all the disciples present felt a suffocating pressure. Feng Manlu and the rest were also slightly surprised. Sword Whisper Mountain Range, Forest of 10,000 Swords. The 10,000 swords that were silent felt the fluctuation of the sword intent. Buzz, the first sword began to tremble. Then the second, the third, in the end, the 10,000 swords in the forest of 10,000 swords trembled together again. The 10,000 swords shook the heavens and the earth. Clang! The swords continued to soar into the sky. Outside the Sword Whisper Mountain Range, many disciples were still in doubt. At this moment, the 10,000 swords in the distant sky turned into a mighty sword river and soared through the sky. The clanging sounds shook the heavens and the earth, shattering the clouds. Those are the swords that have been hidden in the forest of 10,000 swords since ancient times. The 5,000 inner and outer yard disciples exclaimed. Yan Xiaotang's heart trembled when he saw the 10,000 swords soar through the sky. His legs gave way and he fell to the ground. Oh my God! Yan Xiaotang was going crazy. He tried his best and could only resonate with 7,000 swords. However, Yi Guqin stomped his foot on the ground and the 10,000 swords soared through the sky. How magnificent was that scene! Today, I, Yi Guqin, will lead the 10,000 swords of the Sword Whisper Mountain Range to the peak of the Forbidden City for a battle between swords and sabers. Yi Guqin's voice was sonorous and extraordinary as it spread out in all directions. The 10,000 swords hovered in the sky. They covered the sky and the sun. They shook the heavens. All the disciples of the Sword Whisper Mountain Range went crazy. Their blood was boiling and their eyes were red. An inner yard disciple looked at Yi Guqin with a fanatical gaze and suddenly shouted, "We'll go to the peak of the Forbidden City and suppress all those who refuse to obey." Then, there were 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. In the end, the entire Sword Whisper Mountain Range was filled with the roars of the 5,000 inner and outer yard disciples. "We'll go to the peak of the Forbidden City and suppress all those who refuse to obey. Master Yi will return triumphantly with 10,000 swords. Everyone, let's go." Yiguchen smiled with his hands behind his back, his black hair fluttering in the wind. He would open the path with 10,000 swords and head to the peak of the Forbidden City. The demeanor of the sword demon had returned to the mortal world. Chapter 689. The Forbidden Violet Mountain was the tallest mountain in the Saint Origin dynasty. It was more than 10,000 feet tall and towered into the clouds. The entire Forbidden Violet Mountain was made of an extremely sturdy purple gold rock that could withstand a great impact. Since it was the tallest mountain in the dynasty, it had always been the place where experts dueled. On the Forbidden Violet Mountain, there were already many flat arenas. There were fewer arenas as one went up the Forbidden Violet Mountain. At the peak of the Forbidden Violet Mountain, there was only one tallest arena. That was also the place where everyone watched. Around the Forbidden Violet Mountain, there were a few shorter mountains that were developed into spectator areas. Today, the originally quiet Forbidden Purple Mountain was once again lively. Countless sounds of wind breaking could be heard between heaven and earth. Densely packed figures gathered around the Forbidden Violet Mountain like locusts. In less than 2 hours, the originally empty Forbidden Violet Mountain was filled with a hubbub of voices. There were at least 100,000 people gathered there. And the scale was still expanding. That's the leader of the Super family, the Song family. The Zhang family is here too. And the Gongsun family. Little Pepper of the Gongsun family is here too. The people who were present looked around and cheered from time to time. Because almost all the super families in the Saint Origin dynasty had sent people there. Among the crowd, Gongsun Xiaoya's eyes were filled with worry. Sigh, I hope little friend you won't go berserk like the rumors say. Gongsun Xianlong sighed. I don't believe it. Young Master Yi is the best. Gongsun Xiaoya said strongly. Gongsun Yu shook his head. There were not many people who were optimistic about Yiguchen in this sword and saber duel. The sky prides of the other dynasties are here too. At that moment, many people exclaimed. That was because they saw all kinds of flying boats and flying divine weapons in the sky. They were as bright as fireworks. Those were the sky prides of the other dynasties who came to participate in the preliminaries of the Battle of the Sky Prides. They heard about the duel at the peak of the Forbidden Violet Mountain and came to watch the show. The day is finally here. It's quite interesting to watch the noobs fight. Some of the Sky Prides laughed mockingly. Sigh, we might not even be able to see it. Didn't that Yiguchen go mad? We probably came here for nothing. Some of the geniuses laughed. If that's really the case, then it's a little laughable. One by one, the geniuses headed to the peaks around the Forbidden Mountain. Yuwenji, Kuemo, Keiling, Yang Yi, Guiqi Luo, and the others had all arrived. At this moment, the cry of a phoenix suddenly came from the void. A beautiful phoenix boat flew through the sky and landed on a mountain peak where spectators could watch the battle. At the bow of the ship stood a peerlessly beautiful young lady. The phoenix robe draped over her shoulders and her ink-black hair fluttered in the wind. There was a phoenix mark between her eyebrows, making her appear incomparably noble. It's Princess Feng Shi, as expected of an exceptional beauty. Princess Phoenix Dawn's appearance caused many people's eyes to widen. Chu Huang stood beside Princess Feng Shi. At this moment, a star boat flew over from the void and landed on the mountain where Princess Feng Shi was. 3 figures walked out from it. 2 of them were Prince Xing Li and Duan Muyu. The person in the lead had an upright posture. There was a ring of starlight behind his head, emitting endless starlight waves. His eyes were like a starry sky, incomparably deep. It's Prince Xing Long of the Sky Star Dynasty. He actually came too. TSK, this is interesting. Prince Xing Long has been pursuing Princess Feng Shi, and Princess Feng Shi's favor for Yiguchen will undoubtedly bring disaster to him. Some of the Sky Prides whispered to each other. Feng Shi, why are you also interested in such a low-level battle? Prince Xing Long walked towards Princess Feng Shi with a tone of closeness. Aren't you here too? Princess Fengxi said lazily. Ha, it's just a show to pass the time, Prince Xinglong said indifferently. The battle between the sword and sword between the sword sect and the saber fanatic. In his words, it became a show to pass the time. Oh, a show. If the two of them are more powerful than you, then it will be a slap in the face, Princess Fengxi said with a smile. Humph, how is that possible? It's just two chickens pecking at each other. But Fengxi, why would you make such a joke? Prince Xinglong smiled faintly. Joke? Are you talking about young Master Yi? That's not a joke. Princess Fengxi's eyes flashed with a dark light. Oh. Prince Xinglong narrowed his eyes. That, Your Highness, the princess's personality is like this. Chu Huang couldn't help but speak up. In fact, she felt that Prince Xinglong was a good match for Princess Fengxi. Background, and cultivation were all compatible. It could be said that they were a match made in heaven. Princess Fengxi's interest in Yiguchen would undoubtedly cause a rift between her and Prince Xinglong. Chu Huang also didn't want to see such a scene. Ha, this crown prince will naturally not take it to heart. I see that your cultivation is not far from the heaven and earth spiritual bridge. This origin-breaking fruit is for you. Crown Prince Xinghong waved his hand and a fruit that was suffused with jade light landed in Chu Huang's hand. Thank you, Your Highness. Chu Huang was elated. She couldn't help but think more highly of Prince Xinglong. Someone like him was a good match for Princess Fengxi. As for Yiguchen, he could just scram as far as he could. Chu Huang, return it to him. How rude of him to accept someone else's gift, Princess Fengxi said indifferently. This. Chu Huang revealed a trace of grievance. She didn't want to return it. Why are you treating me like an outsider? Just accept it. Prince Xinglong smiled. Thank you. Chu Huang stuck out her tongue. Princess Fengxi held her forehead and shook her head. Yiguchen won't live past today, Prince Xinglong suddenly said with a deep gaze. Oh, is that so? Princess Fengxi's eyes dimmed. No one knew what she was thinking. With the arrival of the various dynasties' sky prides, the atmosphere in the Forbidden Violet Mountain became more and more lively. However, compared to the Saint Origin dynasty's local people, these sky prides were still watching the battle with a superior attitude. Their attitude was similar to Prince Xinglong's. They were only here to watch the show. At this moment, what no one noticed was that the air in the void was slightly distorted. A flying boat was floating in the distorted air and no one could see it. On the flying boat, a white-haired young man stood at the bow of the boat. The attendant beside him asked, Young master, aren't you going to look for the 7 kills Saber Saint's inheritance? Why are you here to watch the boring battle? The 7 kills Saber Saint's inheritance is located in a faction called the Saber Sealing Monarch Palace. I heard that someone called Gu Zun obtained the 7 kills ancient saber, the white-haired young man said. Doesn't that mean that Gu Zun obtained the 7 kills Saber Saint's inheritance? The attendant was surprised. That might not be the case. Obtaining the 7 kills ancient saber doesn't mean that he obtained the complete inheritance. Moreover, I'm also quite interested in the saber sword duel. After all, our sect has been fighting with the Heavenly God's Sword sect for so long, the white-haired young man said with a faint smile. Yeah. Back then, young master also fought with Di Haotian of the Heavenly God's Sword sect. Before the attendant could finish his words, he immediately shut his mouth as he felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. The white-haired young man's smiling face instantly sank. Because that battle was a humiliation to him. Di Haotian was so strong that he, a 9th grade peerless sky pride, felt powerless. Hao Tianlong, the pinnacle of the sword Dao among the younger generation of the South Sky region. I will definitely take revenge for the humiliation you gave me. The white-haired young man murmured with a cold expression. Chapter 690. As time passed, more and more people gathered at the Forbidden Violet Mountain. At first, there were only 100,000 people. But now, as far as the eye could see, there was a black mass of heads. A total of 300,000 people were gathered here. Some people with status stood on the mountain peaks to watch the battle. Ordinary cultivators stood around the forbidden Violet Mountain and could barely see what was going on, while everyone was waiting anxiously. The sound of wind breaking rang out again. The Consonance Palace is here. The Nine Profound Sect is here too. The Saint Origin Institute is here. The 7 major forces of the Saint Origin dynasty showed up one by one. The 100-Flower Palace Master of the Consonance Palace was here with LV Qinghan by her side. The Zither Fairy was not here. The Azure Sun Sect Master, Chen Yi, and Bai Yanji were here too. The Saint Origin Institute's Marquis Huntian came with Prince Yuanyi and Princess Yuanxi. Then, the 3 imperial palaces and the Limitless Sword Sect arrived. The Spiritual Emperor and Flame Emperor of the 3 imperial palaces were here too. The Little War Emperor's eyes were filled with disdain. He wore the 9 Darkness Radiant Dragon armor and held the Overlord halberd as if he was waiting for a great battle. The Limitless Sword Sect's Xian Wuji did not show up. The leader was the Sun Moon Hall Master, Xian Tai, followed by a large group of Limitless Sword Sect's disciples. Xian Feng and Xian Dai were also here. Xian Hao wore a black and white Daoist robe with the Profound Yin and Profound Yang swords on his back. His black and white hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were deep and his aura was calm like a pool of water. Finally, today, Yi Guqin, the grudge between you and me will come to an end in the Forbidden Mountain. Xian Hao muttered to himself as 2 terrifying sword intents were brewing in his eyes. With the arrival of the major forces, the atmosphere reached its peak. Only the 2 sects involved, the Saber-Sealing Monarch Palace and the Sword Sect's Talon Forest, were not here yet. Just when everyone was getting impatient, a voice suddenly rang out. Far away in the sky, a warship traveled through the void, accompanied by a horrifying saber chi that swept out in all directions. The Saber-Sealing Monarch Palace is here. The Saber-Sealing Monarch Palace's arrival made the forbidden Violet Mountain boil. Hundreds of thousands of people's gazes fell on the warship. 2 figures stood in the wind. Imperial Saber Yu Bufan. Saber Maniac, Gu Zun. The 2 figures were accompanied by an awe-inspiring saber intent that seemed capable of slicing through the sky. Is that Prime Sovereign Saber Maniac? Interesting. In the distorted void, the white-haired man's gaze fell on Gu Zun with faint admiration. Although Gu Zun's cultivation wasn't worth his attention, Gu Zun's cultivation wasn't high enough. However, the surging blade chi caused the white-haired man's eyes to light up. Gu Zun's arrival caused an uproar. Gu Zun was the most favored candidate in this battle of saber and sword. He had broken through the life and death threshold with his own willpower. Dragging the saber for 3,000 miles, the profound gate-severing move. In the life and death arena, he had slaughtered 100 people and obtained the title of 100-Man Butcher. All of these achievements made people gasp in admiration. Gu Zun was a saber maniac, a madman, but more than that, he was a saber Dao genius. Is Feng Man Lu not here yet? Yubu Fan's eyes looked into the distance. The saber-conferred king's palace had arrived, but the Sword Sect's pagoda forest was nowhere to be seen. Time trickled by. In the beginning, the atmosphere was still very lively. However, as time passed, the people from the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas never appeared. Are the people from the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas coming or not? Is Yi Guqin afraid? I think it's very likely, haha. Some people began to sneer. After all, the news of Yi Guqin's chi deviation had already spread everywhere. It would be understandable if he didn't come today. However, if that was the case, Yi Guqin's reputation as the Sword Sect would be destroyed. All the reputation he had built up before would go down the drain. Even the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas would be affected and their reputation would fall to the bottom. Ha, as expected. Yu Wenji and the others sneered. Don't miss the trap I set for you, Yi Guqin. Prince Yuanyi murmured. Yi Guchen, are you really a coward? Yang Haotsang frowned. If you don't come, then you don't deserve to be my inner demon, Xian Hao muttered to himself. There was an uproar among the people of the major forces. As for those from the other dynasties, they were even more impatient. Don't tell me we won't even see a chicken pecking at each other today. At least he has the reputation of a sword sect. Is he such a coward? Some prodigies shook their heads and sighed in disappointment. On a mountain peak, Prince Xinghong couldn't help but laugh. Fengxi, looks like we won't even see a monkey show today. Princess Fengxi didn't say anything and sighed slightly. There was a faint disappointment in her eyes. Was the only man who made her suffer really so cowardly? Let's wait a little longer. There's nothing to do anyway, Princess Fengxi said lightly. Looks like we came for nothing. Chu Huang snorted. Just like that, another 2 hours passed. Prince Xinghong had a playful smile at the corner of his mouth. Princess Fengxi sighed deeply. Her interest in Yi Guchen had completely disappeared. Chu Huang, return to the imperial capital, Princess Fengxi said expressionlessly. Yes, you should have done this long ago. Chu Huang smiled. Not only Princess Fengxi, but other prodigies like Yu Wenji, Yang Yi, and Goe Qiluo were also disappointed and prepared to return home. Sigh, looks like the rumors are true. Let's go. Gong Sun Yu sighed slightly. The hundreds of thousands of people around the Forbidden Mountain started to become restless and prepared to leave. Feng Manlu, are you really going to break your promise? Yu Bufan frowned. Right at this moment, clang. Clang. Clang, the sound of metal colliding seemed to come from the void. What's that sound? Some people with sharp senses heard this sound. Clang. Clang. Clang, the sound of metal continuously rang out. Princess Fengxi, Prince Xinghong, Yu Wenji, and all the other prodigies heard this sound. Then, the people from the various forces also heard it. In the end, the sound of metal resonated through the clouds. Just as everyone was feeling bewildered and doubtful, a prodigy casually glanced over and his gaze suddenly froze. What? What is that? The Heaven's Pride exclaimed in shock. Everyone's gazes were directed towards the sky, towards the dome of heaven. Under the gaze of hundreds of thousands of people in the Forbidden Mountain, the sound of metal colliding seemed to have turned into a roaring torrent that rang in everyone's ears. At the end of the sky, a sharp edge appeared. The cold edge of the sword shook the world. That's a sword. Endless swords. A sword Dao master shouted loudly. Under the shocked gazes of hundreds of thousands of people. In the distance, tens of thousands of long swords swept across the sky. The sky and earth split, and the clouds changed color. Vast and mighty, covering the sky and the sun. Even the light cast by the celestial arch sword was covered. Among the tens of thousands of flying swords, a figure with flaming wings on his back flew across the sky. Yi Guchen of the Sword Sect has come today with tens of thousands of swords to meet the heroes in all directions. A carefree voice rang throughout the entire Forbidden Mountain. The sound of metal clanging shook the heavens and earth. A young man in a black robe, his black hair fluttering, and his flaming wings flapping, stood in the void. Tens of thousands of swords circled around like the roar of a dragon. This scene shook the heavens and earth. Everyone's eyes popped out. Chapter 691. The hundreds of thousands of people in the Forbidden Violet Mountain were speechless. As if they had become mutes, they couldn't make a sound. Only his face, which was filled with shock, looked up blankly at the young man standing in the sky. 10,000 flying swords were like a coiling dragon, revolving around his body. He was like the Emperor of Swords, looking down at the heavens. 10,000 swords followed his command, and the heavens and earth were subdued by him. The sword sect, Yi Guchen, had arrived. Shock. Extreme shock. Many people were dumbfounded. 10,000 swords paving the way across the sky. Such an entrance had shocked everyone. It wasn't just a visual shock. To be able to control 10,000 swords across the sky, one must have a powerful sword intent and soul power to do so. How? How is this possible? Some of Yi Guqin's enemies, such as Princess Yuan Shi, Mo Langia, Fang Chen, Black and White Impermanence, turned pale with shock. Controlling 10,000 swords across the sky. Was this really something a 9th transformation divine soul realm cultivator could do? Is he a sword immortal? Around the forbidden Violet Mountain, hundreds of thousands of people looked up. Some ordinary cultivators had never seen such a shocking scene before. Controlling 10,000 swords, wasn't this something only a legendary sword immortal could do? Everyone was astonished. Yu Wenji, Duanmuyu, and the others felt a lump in their throats. Their mouths were agape as they looked at this scene. Even Princess Feng Shi, who was somewhat dispirited and even had the intention to leave, had a frozen expression on her face at this moment. It was fine if he didn't make a sound, but he shocked everyone with a single brilliant feat. Yi Guqin had greatly shocked her. Interesting, really interesting. Yi Guqin, this princess is getting more and more interested in you. Princess Feng Shi's eyes were sparkling as she licked her plump red lips with her tongue. On the side, Xinghong Crown Prince's face suddenly sank. Yi Guqin's shocking opening had surprised him a little. Chu Huang's eyes were wide open, and her mouth was wide open. Brother Yi, this surprise of yours is simply too great, Kenpo said with his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the battle from a mountain peak. He originally thought that he had already overestimated Yi Guqin. But Yi Guqin was always able to refresh his understanding. Just the sight of him controlling 10,000 swords was enough to qualify him as the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. The geniuses from the various dynasties who had been mocking, disdainful were now frozen stiff. What they felt was not only the majestic aura of the 10,000 swords, but also the terrifying soul energy and sword intent. Wasn't Yi Guqin rumored to have gone mad? Some of the Sky Prides exchanged glances and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. What terrifying soul energy and sword insight! The expressions of some of the geniuses from the dynasties carried a rare trace of seriousness. Damn it, after the extreme shock, Queen Yuan Shi, Black and White Impermanence, and the others who had a grudge against Yi Guqin gasped. Maybe Yi Guqin is just putting on a strong front. Mo Langia laughed dryly. Yes, that must be it. Yi Guqin must have gone mad. He's just putting on a strong front, Queen Yuan Shi comforted herself. Young Master Yi, you're so cool. Gongsun Xiaoye shouted from the crowd, her eyes sparkling. She had become Yi Guqin's fangirl. Not only her, but many other girls were also stunned by Yi Guqin's heroic bearing. Yi Guqin's black hair fluttered in the wind, his fiery wings flapped, and 10,000 swords spiraled around him. He was like a sword immortal of the present age. Although Gu Zun was also very strong, his appearance was too weak. In the eyes of these girls, they naturally supported Yi Guqin more. However, due to the rumors about Yi Guqin's cultivation going berserk, they didn't dare to support Yi Guqin. Now, they could finally let out their voices and support Yi Guqin. Boom! Almost as soon as Yi Guqin arrived, Gu Zun's dazed eyes seemed to awaken as he turned to look at Yi Guqin. The Seven Slaughter ancient saber in his hand trembled uncontrollably. It was as if it was responding to Yi Guqin's provocation. Clang! The Seven Slaughter ancient saber unleashed a shocking saber chi that swept across the sky. In an instant, the weather changed. The originally clear sky was filled with blood-red clouds. What is that? The crowd, who had been shocked by Yi Guqin, was shocked again. No, that's killing intent. Some martial artists exclaimed. The blood-red clouds were formed by killing intent. What a terrifying killing intent. This blood-red murderous aura covered all directions. Tens of thousands of martial artists were intimidated by this murderous aura and directly fell to the ground, paralyzed. Could it be? The mysterious white-haired man stared at the seven-slaughter ancient saber in Guzun's hand. Could it be that I will be able to witness the appearance of the seven-slaughter saber saint's successor? The white-haired man took a deep breath with a trace of surprise in his eyes. The seven-slaughter ancient saber in Guzun's hand trembled as blood-red killing intent swept across the sky. Tens of thousands of swords circled around Yiguchin. They were as mighty as the Milky Way, and the cries of the swords suppressed the world. The saber maniac and the sword ancestor had yet to fight. Their killing intent had already enveloped the entire Violet Forbidden Mountain. Is this really just a fight between two weaklings? Some of the prodigies muttered in a daze. They suddenly felt that they had underestimated the two of them. It's just looks. Strength speaks for itself, the Xinghong crown prince snorted coldly. Let's wait and see, Princess Feng, she said with interest. At this moment, the sword ancestors group arrived on a flying boat. A handsome man in fluttering cotton clothes stood on the leading flying ship with his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and composed, and it carried a trace of nostalgia. It's been 10 years since I last came here, Feng Manlu sighed. Yeah, Feng Manlu. It's been 10 years, Yu Bufan sighed as he stepped on the void. Yu Bufan and Feng Manlu stood in the void as they faced each other. The hundreds of thousands of people present held their breaths. Only a small number of people looked at this scene with some nostalgia and sighed. 10 years ago, Yu Bufan had shown his talent and suppressed the world with his sovereign saber. Feng Manlu had repaid his debt of gratitude and enmity with a single sword. Now that 10 years had passed, the one who stood at the peak of the Violet Forbidden Mountain was their successor. Feng Manlu, today is the end of our 10-year agreement, said Yu Bufan. That's right. The saber and sword duel will be decided in this battle, said Feng Manlu. Go, Guzun, said Yu Bufan. Guzun nodded in silence as he held the seven-slaughter ancient saber in his hand. Yiguchin's expression was indifferent as he used his fingers as a sword. Go! As soon as he finished speaking, the 10,000 long swords around him flew towards the peak of the Violet Forbidden Mountain. At the highest point of the mountain, the 10,000 swords clanged as they landed, turning into a thorny arena. Yiguchin and Guzun landed at the foot of the Violet Forbidden Mountain. There were 10 levels from the foot of the mountain to the peak of the Violet Forbidden Mountain. Each level had a different number of arenas. The higher one went, the fewer arenas there were. It seems like the saber and sword duel is about to begin. Some cultivators were looking forward to it. It's not that simple. Can't you see that there are already people blocking the way? Someone commented. As expected, the crowd saw some of the geniuses moving and landing on the arenas of the 10 levels. The peak of the Violet Forbidden Mountain was the most dazzling stage. Guzun and Yiguchin wouldn't be able to step on it so easily. Because someone didn't want them to step on it. Chapter 692. Although the battle of swords and sabers on the top of the Forbidden City was the stage for Yiguchin and Guzun. However, the other Skyprides could stop them midway. If the two of them couldn't even reach the stage, then there was no need to talk about the battle of blade and sword. The Violet Forbidden Peak was the most dazzling stage, and it wasn't easy to reach. Yiguchin placed his hands behind his back and walked up the Violet Forbidden Mountain with an indifferent expression. At the first level, two silhouettes suddenly flashed out. The lady in black and the youth in white were the black and white impermanents of the limitless sword sect, Xian Feng and Xian Dai. Yiguchin, didn't you suffer from qi deviation? How dare you come to the Violet Forbidden Mountain to humiliate yourself? Xian Dai said coldly. What a joke. Yiguchin sneered. Yiguchin, are you still pretending? We've also broken through to the life and death realm. Today, we'll wipe away our previous humiliation. Xian Feng's aura erupted. The true qi of the small gate spread out. Xian Dai did the same. The two of them had both broken through to the small gate. TSK, although the black and white impermanence of the Limitless Sword sect are only at the small gate, they're comparable to a great gate expert if they work together. Yeah, Yi Guqin seems to have only killed Zhou Tong at the small gate. Now, it seems like he'll be in trouble. The sky prides of the 7 major forces whispered to each other. If Yi Guqin couldn't even pass the first stage, then the battle of blade and sword against Gu Zun would undoubtedly be a joke. Ha, Fengshi, you told me to wait and see. I want to see if he can pass the first stage. Xinghong Crown Prince smiled faintly. Princess Fengshi didn't reply. She didn't know Yi Guqin's true strength. But with his Divine Soul 9th transformation, it would be difficult for him to face the 2 sky prides at the small gate. Yi Guqin, can you still create a surprise for me? Princess Fengshi murmured in her heart. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yi Guqin. If Yi Guqin could not even defeat the black and white impermanence, then this sword duel was a complete joke. Yi Guqin's expression was extremely calm as he looked at Xian Feng and Xian Dai. One move. As the 2 words fell, Xian Feng and Xian Dai were stunned. Not only that, but the surrounding people were also stunned. What do you mean? Xian Dai's face turned cold. If I can't defeat you in one move, then I, Yi Guqin, can kill myself. Yi Guqin's tone was indifferent. He wasn't arrogant or complacent. He was just calmly stating a fact. However, Yi Guqin's words left everyone stunned. A 9th transformation Divine Soul Realm expert said such words to a life and death chamber expert. Was he confident, or was he just being arrogant? What a joke. Grand Star Crown Prince flicked his sleeves and snorted disdainfully. He was not the only one. Most of the prodigies from the other dynasties were the same. Not to mention that Yi Guqin's cultivation was not at the life and death chamber. Even if they were at the same level, it would be difficult to defeat the enemy in one move. Not to mention Xian Feng and Xian Dai. If the 2 of them worked together, even ordinary great profound martial realm experts would not dare to say that they could suppress them in one move. What qualifications did Yi Guqin have? Ha, Yi Guqin, you are indeed joking. I, Xian Dai, am standing here. Let's see how you suppress us in one move. Xian Dai was so angry that she laughed. Yi Guqin's eyes were indifferent and he did not say anything else. He stomped on the ground with one foot, and a terrifying wave of true qi gushed out. The golden sea of qi suddenly spun, and the true qi that far exceeded that of an ordinary person surged out along his meridians. At the same time, his chaotic sea of consciousness also spread out, and an extremely powerful soul power surged out like a tide, attacking the black and white impermanence. Not good. Xian Dai, who had a look of disdain, instantly changed her face when she felt this terrifying fluctuation. Xian Feng's face also changed drastically. However, before they could make a move, that powerful soul power directly swept through their sea of consciousness. Rumble. Xian Feng and Xian Dai's minds shook violently, and they felt that their sea of consciousness was about to shatter. If their sea of consciousness was said to be a river, Yi Guqin's chaotic sea of consciousness was an endless whirlpool. The black and white impermanents were stunned, and their senses were blank. The 4th move of the immortal murdering sword art, Immortal Fall. In Yi Guqin's hand, the Xianming heavy sword was held horizontally. When the sword was swung out, a biting cold sword qi spread out, as if the scene of a group of immortals falling appeared. Puff! Xian Feng and Xian Dai, as if they were hit by a huge wave, spat out mouthfuls of blood, and a huge sword qi wound appeared on their bodies. Plop! The 2 of them were like 2 dead dogs, flying out and then heavily smashing outside the arena. Yi Guqin held the heavy sword in his hand, and the tip of the sword was slanted to the ground. He did not look back. He did not say anything. Step by step in silence, he continued to walk towards the top of the Forbidden City. Dead silence. The entire arena was dead silent. Only the sound of people gasping could be heard one after another. One move. It was really just one move. The 9 transformations of the divine soul had turned 2 minor profound martial realm experts into 2 dead dogs with one move. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would dare to believe it. The Xinghong Crown Prince's face slightly froze, and his hands slightly clenched. How is this possible? Chu Huang also gasped. Although her cultivation was at the great profound martial realm, it was almost impossible for her to suppress 2 minor profound martial realm experts with one move. But Yi Guqin did it. Xinghong Crown Prince, this is getting more and more interesting. Princess Feng, she smiled charmingly. Let's continue watching. Defeating 2 minor profound martial realm experts is nothing. The Xinghong Crown Prince's face was slightly unnatural, but he still said in a deep voice. The contempt in the eyes of Duan Muyu, Yu Wenji, and the others also disappeared without a trace. The hundreds of thousands of people present were all shocked. Didn't they say that Yi Guqin's cultivation went berserk? Why do I feel that he's even stronger than before? Yeah, he had to put in some effort to defeat Zhou Tong, who was at the minor profound martial realm. But now, he can suppress 2 minor profound martial realm experts in an instant. The entire Forbidden Violet Mountain was in an uproar. Now, everyone knew. The rumor that Yi Guqin's cultivation had gone berserk was nonsense. If this could be called going berserk, then all cultivators hoped that they could go berserk. Damn it, Yi Guqin actually spread fake news to deceive everyone. Princess Yuan, she gnashed her teeth in hatred. She was still gloating over Yi Guqin's misfortune. But now, it looked like she was a fool. This made Princess Yuan she feel like she was being played. But to be honest, Yi Guqin had never said that he had gone berserk. Everything was just a rumor, but Princess Yuan she still foolishly believed it. Yi Guqin, the higher you stand, the worse you will fall. Prince Yuan Yi's face darkened. Just as Yi Guqin defeated the black and white deities with one move. On the other side, Gu Zun also encountered someone blocking his way. Chen Yi of the 9 Profound Sect. Chen Yi, who was dressed in green, had also reached the minor profound martial realm. He knew his limits and didn't think he could beat Gu Zun. But as Yi Guqin's friend, Chen Yi only wanted to exhaust Gu Zun's genuine qi. My saber will either kill or cripple you. Gu Zun dragged his saber, his face expressionless, but his tone was cold. Thank you. Chen Yi frowned. Swoosh. A dazzling saber light that was as swift as lightning tore through the void. Puchi. Blood splattered. Chen Yi's expression changed abruptly as he retreated. A huge wound spread from his chest to his chest. Chen Yi, the famous green-clothed sword cultivator of the 9 Profound Sect. He could not block Gu Zun's saber. Chapter 693. The crowd was in an uproar once more. Yi Guqin's strength had already shocked them. However, Gu Zun's strength wasn't any weaker than Yi Guqin's. That's normal. Yu Bufan nodded his head at the saber-sealing King Palace's side. For Gu Zun, who had killed hundreds of life and death experts and obtained the title of 100 Human Butcher, it was normal for him to injure Chen Yi with one strike. Gu Zun was expressionless and didn't have the slightest hint of joy. He also silently walked towards the top of the Forbidden City. The other dynasty's elites were silent. Yi Guqin and Gu Zun's performance had already surpassed the standards of some mid-tier dynasties' elites. They weren't weak even among the high-tier dynasties. Next, Yi Guqin and Gu Zun both encountered obstacles. From the bottom of the Forbidden City to the top. There were a total of 10 levels. That was to say, Yi Guqin and Gu Zun had to fight their way to the top of the Forbidden City and start a real sword and saber duel. This was also a test for both sides. Yi Guqin had once again stepped onto the next level. 3 silhouettes stood there. They were the 3 blades of the Sky Blade list. Demonic Blade Ling Ju, Fiendish Blade Nia Ling, and blood blade mo juechen. Yi Guchen pointed his Xianming broadsword at the ground as his black hair fluttered in the wind. Yi Guchen, we'll end our grudge today, mo juechen said. All of you, come at me together. Yi Guchen held his sword with one hand and placed the other behind his back. A gust of wind blew past his black hair. He was calm, indifferent, and willful. Boom! Without any superfluous words, mo juechen and the other two attacked. Surging blade aura reverberated in the air. Yi Guchen poured his true qi into the Xianming broadsword. Vigorous transparent sword ripples swept out in all directions, cleansing heaven and earth. Boom! 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 There was no suspense. The three blades were defeated. Yi Guchen, we'll end our grudge today. Mo Juechen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and dragged his heavily injured body away. He had been entangled with Yi Guchen for long enough. Now, he knew that he was no match for Yi Guchen. Since that was the case, he might as well put an end to it. Yi Guchen did not say a word as he continued to walk towards the peak. On the other side, Gu Zun did the same, cleanly sweeping away those who stood in his way. The hundreds of thousands of people around the Forbidden Mountain held their breaths as they looked at the two people who were almost unstoppable. He was immersed in the carefree feeling of sweeping through everything. Hee, looks like this duel is going to be interesting. Princess Phoenix Dawn was only interested in Yi Guchen, so she came to watch the duel. However, from the looks of it now, the battle between the two of them was indeed something to look forward to. It's still a monkey show. Seeing the brilliance in Princess Feng Shi's beautiful eyes, Crown Prince Xinghong couldn't help but feel even more displeased. Because this glory was brought about by Yi Guchen. Oh, if that's the case, why didn't you stop Yi Guchen? Princess Phoenix Dawn asked with a smile. Do you think he's qualified for me to do it myself? Crown Prince Xinghong said disdainfully. Even if Yi Guchen had shown extraordinary strength now, his attitude was as disdainful as ever. Who was he? He was a top genius of the Sky Star dynasty, a heaven and earth spirit bridge genius. Personally dealing with Yi Guchen would only lower his status. On another peak, Kenpo clicked his tongue in wonder. He could feel that the strength Yi Guchen had shown was just the tip of the iceberg. Brother Yi, how much more can you shock me? Kenpo muttered to himself. In the distorted void, the white-haired man's gaze was fixed on Gu Zun. I didn't expect that there would be someone who could perfectly control the Seven Slaughter ancient saber. Could it be that Gu Zun has the Seven Slaughter fate? Young master, if Gu Zun has truly inherited the Seven Slaughter saber saint's inheritance, what should we do? The attendant asked. If that's the case, I'm sure those old fellows in the sect will be overjoyed. In the future, Gu Zun might even be one of the top 10 young masters in the South Sky region, the white-haired man said. He has such great potential. The attendant was shocked. The top 10 young masters were already the pinnacle of the younger generation in the South Sky region. Never underestimate a madman's potential. I think that sword cultivator Yi Guchen is going to be in trouble today. The white-haired man shook his head and sighed. Just as the crowd was discussing animatedly, Yi Guchen had finally reached the halfway point of the mountain. As soon as he stepped on it, he saw a figure with a murderous aura. He was wearing the 9 Serenities dragon armor and holding the Overlord halberd. His black hair fluttered in the wind and his face was cold. He was like a god of war, domineering and unparalleled. It was the junior war emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, Yang Haotsang. Even the junior war emperor, Yang Haotsang, has taken action. Of course he has to take action. The 3 young emperors were killed by Yi Guchen and he's the only one left. If he doesn't take action, wouldn't the 3 imperial palaces lose face? Tsk. However, the junior war emperor is the direct disciple of the war emperor. Rumor has it that his fighting strength is unparalleled. He's not on the same level as the black and white impermanence and demonic blade Ling Ju. Yeah. Looks like Sword Sect Yi is in trouble. As the junior war emperor appeared, everyone started discussing. I wonder if Yang Haotsang can deal with this little bastard. In the air, the flame emperor's expression was stern. No matter what, he's going to die today. The spirit emperor's eyes were filled with coldness. Yi Guqin had killed Zhou Tong in front of him. But the spirit emperor couldn't take revenge. His reputation had fallen to the bottom because of this. Yi Guqin could be said to be a thorn in the side of the three imperial palaces. If Yang Haotsang could kill Yi Guqin personally, it would be enough to wash away the shame of the three imperial palaces. But if he couldn't, the spirit emperor and the others wouldn't let Yi Guqin go. Therefore, in their eyes, Yi Guqin was already a dead man. Yang Haotsang. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. Although Yang Haotsang only had a minor profound gait, his strength was unparalleled. He wasn't at the same level as the black and white impermanence and Lingju. Facing Yang Haotsang, Yi Guqin wouldn't be able to kill him so easily. Yi Guqin. Yang Haotsang held the overlord halberd in his hand and looked at Yi Guqin with disdain. A murderous aura spread out in all directions. Don't tell me that you're taking action for Zhou Tong and the others. Yi Guqin's voice was indifferent. It doesn't matter if someone like him dies. But you're still an enemy that the three imperial palaces must eliminate. Yang Haotsang said coldly. If that's the case, then there's no need to say anything more. I, Yi Guqin, am here today to suppress all those who refuse to submit. Yi Guqin's true qi gushed out like an ancient volcano and covered the surroundings. Who can suppress me, the little war emperor? You? Yang Haotsang shouted coldly and the aura of the life and death chamber burst out. Overlord halberd's 7 slashes, mountain shattering. The overlord halberd swept out and it was as if it could shatter the mountain shattering. The sharp halberd light swept towards Yi Guqin. Great Void Sword Wave's ultimate move, Void Destruction. Yi Guqin's Xianming heavy sword swept out in all directions and the unparalleled sword qi seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth. After such a long period of comprehension and cultivation, Yi Guqin's Great Void Sword Wave had already reached the perfection realm and he had completely comprehended the ultimate move. The endless sword wave seemed to gather together and it caused the void to tremble as if it was about to be destroyed. The halberd and sword collided and endless ripples swept across the arena. Chapter 694. One was a sword master with unparalleled sword Dao. The other was a young war emperor with unparalleled battle strength. Although it wasn't as meaningful as the sword and blade battle, it was still very eye-catching. After all, in terms of battle strength, the young war emperor was one of the top existences in the Saint Origin dynasty. Although he wasn't as strong as Princess Feng Shi and Xing Hong Crown Prince, he was still strong enough to defeat anyone in the life and death chamber. Boom! The clanging sound of metal colliding spread out in all directions. Yi Guqin's sword resonated with the void, and a move of void destruction was performed. The surrounding air seemed to be on the verge of shattering. Yang Haotsang's expression changed slightly. He felt as if he was placed on top of a drum. Humph! A groan came from Yang Haotsang's chest. Although he was wearing the 9 Darkness Radiant Dragon armor, it couldn't block the damage from the sword wave resonance. With just one exchange of blows, some injuries had appeared on his internal organs. No way. Is the young war emperor going to be defeated so quickly? All the cultivators present were dumbfounded. The young war emperor was one of the top geniuses in the Saint Origin dynasty. He had always been one of the top existences in terms of battle strength. Spirit Emperor and Flame Emperor, the 2 divine palace experts from the 3 imperial palaces, had their faces sunk. It hadn't been long since they last met, but Yi Guqin's strength had become much stronger than when he was in the Great Desolate Prefecture's northern Yang City. Your strength is different from the past, the 2 retreated at the same time as Yang Haotsang said coldly. A scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes, let alone a sword cultivator of my generation. Yi Guqin said indifferently. But do you think I'll back down? You're wrong. Yi Guqin, today, I, the young war emperor, will kill you under the overlord halberd. Yang Haotsang shouted coldly as he took a step forward. Sharp true qi exploded from under his feet, and crushed stones flew in all directions. His body shot towards Yi Guqin like a cannonball. Overlord halberd 7 slashes, sweeping 8 desolates. Vigorous true qi was poured into the overlord halberd. The dark golden halberd emitted an immeasurable amount of divine light, and an incomparably sharp fluctuation swept out in all directions. Boundless sword art. Transform into a boundless thousand. Yi Guqin slashed out with his Xianming heavy sword, and boundless sword qi gushed out. It was as if it had turned into the trajectory of the great thousand worlds, and it blocked all of Yang Haotsang's attacks. At the same time, Yi Guqin used his shadow steps, leaving behind an afterimage. His body broke through the smoke and dust as the Xianming heavy sword pierced out. Tyrant halberd 7 slashes, splitting territory. When Yang Haotsang saw this, his halberd flew across the sky and pierced towards Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin did not dodge. Yang Haotsang furrowed his brows at the moment they crossed paths. His overlord halberd pierced through Yi Guqin's body. What? Yi Guqin isn't dodging. Some of the ordinary martial artists who were watching the battle exclaimed. However, in the next instant, the sharp halberd light of the overlord halberd pierced through Yi Guqin's body. Phantom. Yang Haotsang furrowed his brows. He felt as if there was a dagger at his back. Whoosh! A sharp sword qi shot out from the back of his head. 9 Serenity's dragon armor, motionless bell. Yang Haotsang infused his true qi into the black armor on the surface of his body. Countless defensive runes flowed on the surface of the armor. Suddenly, an illusory black bell condensed on the surface of his body, and it covered his body like a protective shield. Clang! Yang Haotsang turned his body. As expected, a sword pierced his back and hit the motionless bell. Shadow assassination swordplay. Yang Haotsang held the overlord halberd in his hand and slashed at Yi Guqin. Whoosh! However, the halberd still pierced through Yi Guqin's body without any hindrance. What's going on? Yang Haotsang's expression changed. Boom! Sword qi shot out from all directions around him, and many figures of Yi Guqin appeared. Counting carefully, there were more than 10 Yi Guqin silhouettes. They attacked Yang Haotsang with their swords from all directions. It was the ultimate move of the shadow assassination swordplay, Phantom Kill. The shadow assassination swordplay was only a spirit-level sword art, and Yi Guqin could easily cultivate it to the transcendent level. Facing Yi Guqin coming from all directions, Yang Haotsang raised his hand. The true qi in Yang Haotsang's body erupted like a volcano. Thousand Beasts halberd art, peacock halberd. Yang Haotsang roared and slashed the overlord halberd toward the sky. In an instant, thousands of sharp halberd qi shot out in all directions like a peacock spreading its tail. The halberd qi swept across the void. Sword qi gushed out in all directions. Boom! 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 Countless explosions rang out in a short period of time. The entire arena was shaking, and debris flew into the air. Bang! After a violent collision, Yang Haotsang was pushed back dozens of steps. The overlord halberd stabbed into the ground and stopped his body from retreating. On the other side, Yi Guqin was pushed back dozens of steps as well. However, he was much calmer in comparison. Although there was no clear winner, it was clear who had the upper hand. Sword Sect Yi, has he already become so powerful? Under the gaze of hundreds of thousands of people, Yi Guqin looked calm. Do you still want to fight? Yi Guqin asked calmly. Ha! Ha! Yang Haotsang raised the overlord halberd and laughed. His black hair fluttered in the wind, and his expression was arrogant. The 9 Serenity's dragon armor was covered with sword marks. Yi Guqin, since you can make me, Yang Haotsang, use my full strength today, I'll show you what a combat emperor is. As soon as he finished speaking, the young combat emperor roared toward the sky. His body was burning with true qi. His aura was rising steadily, almost reaching the peak of the life and death threshold. He was just one step away from the bridge of heaven and earth. It's the 3 imperial palaces qi explosion secret technique. Some warriors exclaimed. The qi explosion secret technique could push the Dantian sea of qi to the limit, but it was also a great burden to the sea of qi. After using it once, one's true qi would be exhausted for a long time, and it would take at least half a year to recover. Not only that, Yang Haotsang's true qi was not ordinary. It was black and gold true qi. What kind of true qi is that? It seems to be a heterogeneous true qi. Could it be Combat Emperor true qi? Some of the warriors widened their eyes when they saw it. Other than ordinary true qi, there were also some warriors who possessed heterogeneous true qi. For example, flame true qi, ice true qi, etc. The golden true qi released by Yiguchen's golden sea of qi was also a heterogeneous true qi. The black and gold true qi released by Yang Haotsang was also a heterogeneous true qi. It was a technique unique to combat emperors. Yiguchen, let's fight again. Yang Haotsang's eyes shone brightly. He took a step forward, and combat emperor true qi gushed out. It was like a tiger that could swallow 10,000 miles. Thousand Beasts Halberd Art, Heavenly Dragon Halberd. Yang Haotsang's overlord halberd came slashing at Yiguchen. Combat Emperor true qi wrapped around the halberd, and it seemed to have turned into a roaring dragon. How terrifying! The young combat emperor's strength is at least 5 times stronger than before. Everyone's gaze froze. Would Yiguchen be able to withstand Yang Haotsang's attack? Yiguchen remained calm when he saw Yang Haotsang's ferocious killing intent. Perfect physique, erupt. Impeccable body of Vajra, erupt. 360 golden sword veins, erupt. Yiguchen held his sword with both hands and pointed it at the sky. The terrifying sword qi surged up as if it wanted to destroy the 9 heavens imperial court. 5th style of the immortal slaying sword technique, immortal annihilation. The sword shook the universe, and the immortals were annihilated. Chapter 695. Yiguchen and Yang Haotsang's ultimate moves clashed together. The azure dragon halberd shook the heavens and a fierce halberd light swept out in all directions. The immortal vanquishing sword shook the 8 desolates and the sword qi rushed up to the heavens. Boom! A violent explosion shook the eardrums of the hundreds of thousands of people present. Thick smoke and dust rose up into the sky and true energy rippled out in all directions. In the midst of the collision, the sound of someone vomiting blood could be heard. Who is it? Hundreds of thousands of people's gazes were fixed on the center of the collision. A gust of wind blew, scattering the smoke and dust. As the mist dissipated, a figure in a black robe appeared before everyone's eyes. Yiguchen. Everyone's eyes narrowed. The disciples of the 3 imperial palaces, including the spiritual emperor and the flame emperor, had a grave expression on their faces. Yiguchen's sword was pointed at the ground. Apart from his slightly messy clothes, there were no obvious injuries on his body. On the other side, Yang Haotsang's figure appeared before everyone's eyes. The little war emperor was half kneeling on the ground with one knee. The 9 Serenity's dragon armor on his body was also covered in cracks. Blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. The war emperor's true energy that surrounded his body was also starting to become unstable. Hua! An uproar that shook the heavens swept out in all directions like a tidal wave. In this clash, the little war emperor was at a disadvantage. This was something that no one had expected. After all, the little war emperor had already used his trump card, the war emperor's true energy. Yet, he still couldn't defeat Yiguchen. Yiguchen's expression was calm. He wasn't surprised by this result. The war emperor's true energy was indeed very strong. It could almost crush any ordinary true energy. However, It was a pity that Yi Guqin's Qi was at the limit of 10,000 feet. His true energy was golden in color and was much more vigorous than ordinary true energy. Therefore, Yang Haotsang's hidden trump card was useless against Yi Guqin. Therefore, it was natural for him to be at a disadvantage. No. Impossible. Yi Guqin, how can your true energy be so strong? Yang Haotsang's expression was stern as he stood up. His legs were trembling slightly. The Battle Emperor's true qi that he was so proud of was not only ineffective, it was even suppressed by Yi Guqin's golden true qi. Yi Guqin didn't say much. He naturally couldn't reveal his secret. Boom. Yi Guqin did not say anything unnecessary. The heavy sword streaked across the sky once again, compressing the air around it as it charged toward Yang Haotsang. I, the little war emperor, refuse to accept this. Yang Haotsang's Shenqi erupted once again as he faced the sky and let out a long howl. Who was he? The personal disciple of the war emperor. He was the #1 genius in the Saint Origin dynasty. How could he lose to Yi Guqin in front of so many people? Myriad Beasts Halberd Technique, Bite and Halberd. Yang Haotsang stimulated his potential and gathered his true qi again, pouring it into the Overlord Halberd. True qi gushed out, and the halberd light burst forth, as if it had transformed into a roaring lion. Yi Guqin's sword swept across, and the sharp sword light seemed like it was going to chop off the lion's head. The two of them collided once again. The sword and halberd collided, and dazzling sparks flew everywhere. Yang Haotsang's potential was squeezed to the limit. This was the only chance for him to regain the dignity of the 3 imperial palaces and his dignity as the young war emperor. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Yi Guqin's true qi was stable, and it was as steady as Mount Tai. Yang Haotsang's Battle Emperor's true qi was forced out by the qi explosion secret technique. Therefore, it was extremely unstable. If this continues, Yang Haotsang will lose. Some people with a discerning eye could see through the situation. The Spirit Emperor and the Flame Emperor's faces were extremely gloomy. Yang Haotsang was the strongest of the 3 imperial palaces, and he was also the strongest genius of the 3 imperial palaces. If he lost to Yi Guqin in front of so many people, the 3 imperial palaces would be destroyed. The 3 imperial palaces would become a laughing stock. It seems like Yang Haotsang can only use that move. The Flame Emperor said in a low voice. Yes. The War Emperor used his true qi to help Yang Haotsang condense that move in order to kill Yi Guqin. However, that move is too powerful, and Yang Haotsang's body can't withstand it. After he uses it, he will be half crippled. The Spirit Emperor said with a solemn face. For the sake of the 3 imperial palaces' reputation and to kill Yi Guqin, sacrificing Yang Haotsang is nothing. The Flame Emperor said coldly. The Spirit Emperor nodded his head slightly. The 2 sovereigns looked indifferent. They believed that with Yang Haotsang's character, he would definitely use that move in the end. Bang! On the arena at the mountainside of the Forbidden City, Yi Guqin collided with Yang Haotsang's attack again, and it was like 2 meteors colliding. With a loud bang, Yang Haotsang's body was pushed back again. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and it seemed like he had reached his limit. On the other hand, Yi Guqin's aura was still stable and he looked calm. Look, the young war emperor's aura is dropping. Some of the sharp-eyed people could feel that Yang Haotsang's aura was dropping. If this continues, I will be defeated. Yang Haotsang held the Overlord halberd tightly. He clenched his teeth. His strong belief made him unable to admit his defeat. Yang Haotsang must win this battle. I can only use that move. However, after using that move, my body will be half crippled. Yang Haotsang was struggling in his heart. After using that move, he might be stuck in the path of cultivation for the rest of his life. Yang Haotsang, stop. Yi Guqin said faintly. Aside from the grudge between the three imperial palaces, he and Yang Haotsang did not have any personal grudges. If this continued, Yang Haotsang would be the one who would be defeated in the end. Yi Guchen, are you pitying me? Yang Haotsang's chest heaved up and down. I'm not pitying you. It's just a fact. Yi Guchen said calmly. Ha ha ha. When did I, the young war emperor, fall to the point where I need to be pitied? Yi Guchen, even if I have to risk my life, I will defeat you. Yang Haotsang was furious, and his black hair danced in the wind. He was like a god of war in his twilight years, and he was about to unleash his final glory. His true energy was burning. His blood was erupting. Yang Haotsang's aura did not decrease, but increased instead, like an erupting volcano. You. Yi Guchen frowned as he felt a sense of danger. A terrifying aura exploded from Yang Haotsang's body. It was not a power that belonged to Yang Haotsang. Strike of the god of war. Yang Haotsang roared toward the sky, and the overlord halberd slashed through the sky. The violent true energy almost broke through Yang Haotsang's meridians and body. His whole body was bathed in blood, and blood splattered everywhere. Injuring 1,000 of the enemy, but losing 800 of his own. What? What is going on? What a terrifying power. Impossible, it is impossible for Yang Haotsang to unleash such a powerful power. This is caused by an external force. The spectators exclaimed. The strike of the god of war had almost broken through the limits of the life and death threshold, and reached the level of the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. Is he cheating? Princess Phoenix Dawn's expression changed. The power of this attack had almost broken through the spiritual bridge of heaven and earth. Not good. The disciples of the Sword Sect's Forest of Pagodas all had ugly expressions. It was obvious that Yang Haotsang had unleashed a power that did not belong to him. Not many life and death thresholds could withstand this attack. Yi Guchen, die. Yang Haotsang was like a mad demon as he slashed down with the strike of the god of war, destroying the 8 winds and clouds. Yi Guchen let out a deep breath and gathered his true energy. The power of the sword range exploded. A sword slashed through the sky. The 6th move of the immortal murdering sword technique. Immortal Fall. Chapter 696. Boom. A deafening explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. A mushroom cloud rose into the air, and true energy rippled out in all directions. The entire forbidden purple mountain seemed to tremble slightly. Everyone stared. Everyone had witnessed it with their own eyes. Yang Haotsang's sudden burst of power clearly didn't belong to him. Yang Haotsang would probably be crippled for the rest of his life after using this move. 3 imperial palaces. What a great move. Feng Manlu said indifferently in front of the Sword Sect's Forest of Pagodas. However, that faint chill seemed to have covered the entire world. Everyone knew that the Sword King was truly enraged. If it was a fair battle, Feng Manlu wouldn't say anything. But the war god's attack wasn't something that Yang Haotsang could use. The winner takes all. Is the Sword King still so childish? The spiritual emperor said indifferently. In the face of such shameless remarks, Lin Fan was stunned. Many of the cultivators present were secretly disdainful. But they didn't dare to say anything because of the Divine Palace realm's power. However, everyone knew that the 3 imperial palaces were willing to sacrifice Yang Haotsang in order to kill Yi Guchen. Using such a move is indeed shameless. Princess Feng Shi frowned slightly. The winner takes all. Crown Prince Xinghong was rather open-minded, and the corners of his mouth carried a smile. After this move, Yi Guchen should be dead. After all, the war god's attack could even injure heaven and earth spiritual bridge experts like them. Not to mention a mere 9 changes divine soul realm cultivator. Su Jianshi and the others' hearts were in their throats as they stared at the dust cloud. When the dust cloud dissipated, everyone looked over. Puchi. Yang Haotsang knelt on the ground with the overlord halberd planted on the ground. His body was covered in blood. After using the move that the war emperor had condensed in his body, Yang Haotsang's body couldn't withstand the impact. His qi was destroyed, and his meridians were crippled. The young war emperor, the genius of his generation, had become a cripple. Everyone's gaze shifted to the other side. Yi Guqin's body was also covered in blood. On his shoulder, near his heart, there was a bloody hole. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. Evidently, the war god's attack had also caused Yi Guqin great injuries. How is this possible? Everyone was dumbfounded. It wasn't because of Yi Guqin's injuries. It was because Yi Guqin was actually still alive. Not dead. How is that possible? Crown Prince Xinghong's expression was slightly stunned. Yi Guqin, you're bringing me more and more surprises. Princess Phoenix Dawn giggled. A 9 transformations divine soul was able to withstand an attack comparable to a heaven and earth spiritual bridge expert. He was only injured and not dead. This was beyond everyone's expectations. Ling Huang's and Yan Huang's faces sank. It was as if he had eaten a dead fly. He's still alive. The faces of the two rulers were ashen. Yi Guqin was not dead. As for the young war emperor, he was completely crippled after using the strike of the battle god. The 3 imperial palaces suffered a huge loss. Everyone from the Sword Sect's Tower Forest let out a sigh of relief. However, Yan Wushuang and the others were still worried. Yi Guqin's injuries looked serious. How was he going to face the remaining challenges? If he was seriously injured before facing a prime sovereign, the result would be self-evident. Su Jianshir's eyes flashed with worry as she turned to look at Gu Zun. Her clear eyes were filled with determination. On the stage, Yi Guqin wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The huge wound on his shoulder looked terrifying. However, Yi Guqin's physical body was too strong. He had the perfect physical body, the flawless diamond body, and the ancient god body. He also had the ancient god blood to heal him. This kind of injury wasn't enough to shake Yi Guqin's foundation. Is it worth it? You've already been abandoned by the war emperor, Yi Guqin said coldly. Ha ha. Yang Haotsang, who had lost all of his cultivation base and knees, let out a bitter laugh. His laughter grew louder and louder until it was almost a roar. With his qi destroyed and his meridians destroyed, Yang Haotsang could only be a cripple for the rest of his life. Yi Guqin didn't personally end Yang Haotsang's life. He held the Xianming broadsword and continued to walk towards the top of the Forbidden City. His figure passed by Yang Haotsang. Yang Haotsang's laughter suddenly stopped and his face was filled with sorrow. Yang Haotsang, would rather die than become a king. He picked up the overlord halberd and stabbed it into his chest. Under the gazes of hundreds of thousands of people, blood splattered everywhere. One strike from the halberd took his life. It was better to end his own life than to be a cripple for the rest of his life. The 3 imperial palaces' little war emperors had committed suicide. Sigh, Yi Guqin sighed softly and did not turn around to look. At this point, the 3 imperial palaces' little war emperors had all died in Yi Guqin's hands. The younger generation of the 3 imperial palace has been annihilated, the hundreds of thousands of people present were all silent, their faces filled with sighs. Who would have thought that the 3 imperial palaces' famous little war emperors would all die? Many people looked towards the 3 imperial palaces' camp. The disciples of the 3 imperial palace were filled with sorrow. The spiritual emperor and the flame emperor took a deep breath. They couldn't suppress their extreme anger. They hated Yi Guqin. They hated Yang Haotsang even more. He had committed suicide in front of everyone. He had completely thrown the 3 imperial palaces' face away. The 3 imperial palaces would become a complete laughingstock. But this little bastard is already heavily injured. Even if he can reach the top of the Forbidden City, what can he do? Can he deal with Gu Zun, who is in his peak condition? The Flame Emperor said coldly. That's true. Yi Guqin can only live a little longer. The Spiritual Emperor said coldly. Not only them, but everyone present also saw it. Although both of them were reaching the top of the Forbidden City, Yi Guqin was obviously injured by the battle god's attack. On the other hand, although Gu Zun was also exhausted, he didn't suffer any serious injuries. In this way, during the final battle, Yi Guqin's condition would definitely be worse than Gu Zun's. In addition, Gu Zun's cultivation was already superior to Yi Guqin's. The final result was self-evident. Sigh, today's result is already decided. Some of the spectators shook their heads. The people of the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest clenched their fists in silence. Would the invincible Sword Sect really be defeated? It's not impossible for junior brother Yi to turn the tables. As long as someone can injure Gu Zun, the two of them will be pulled back to the same level. Ji Ling pondered. As soon as he said this, everyone fell silent. How many people in the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest could be Gu Zun's match? I'll go. Yen Wushuang clenched her teeth. Cousin, how can you go? Gu Zun isn't weak. Yen Xiaotang hurriedly said. Then why don't you go? Yen Wushuang said coldly. Yen Xiaotang's face froze. He couldn't even defeat Yi Guqin. How could he deal with Gu Zun? Even if he could, he wouldn't do it. Everyone, there's no need for you to worry. Su Jianshi suddenly spoke. Her clear eyes flashed with determination. Silly boy, I'll personally witness how you dominate the world with your sword. Thus, before that, this young lady will not allow any unfair factors to affect your victory. Su Jianshi muttered to herself as she took out the vermilion bird sword that Yi Guqin had given her. Her jade-like hand lovingly stroked the blade of the sword as she pursed her lips into a sweet smile. Chapter 697. As time passed, battle after battle broke out on the Violet Forbidden Peak. It was Yi Guqin and Gu Zun fighting against the enemies that were obstructing them from reaching the peak. Only by defeating these obstacles could Yi Guqin and Gu Zun be qualified to have an ultimate sword and saber duel in the highly anticipated arena on the top of the Forbidden City. However, these obstructions were mostly from the Saint Origin dynasty. For example, Yu Wenji, Duan Muyu, Prince Xingli and the others who had a grudge against Yi Guqin. None of them made a move to stop them. It wasn't because they were being kind. It was because they didn't bother to make a move because of their status. Even though Yi Guqin had displayed extraordinary battle strength, the contempt in their bones still existed. Boring. Xinghong Crown Prince yawned. The interesting part is yet to come. Princess Feng Shi watched with great interest. On the other side, Saber 9 could not help but exclaim in admiration as he watched. Even the mysterious white-haired man hidden in the void was staring at Gu Zun. Compared to Yi Guqin, Gu Zun didn't suffer any injuries. He only consumed a little of his true qi. In comparison, Yi Guqin, who had a huge wound on his shoulder, seemed a little more miserable. Everyone was well aware that if this were to continue, the situation would change drastically. Gu Zun would have a great advantage. Gu Zun is not only a life and death realm expert, but his blade aura is also ferocious. Those who fight him will either die or be crippled. On the other hand, although Yi Guqin's attacks are straightforward, they aren't particularly ferocious. Some people commented. Because Gu Zun was too ferocious, not many people dared to stop him. Moreover, Yi Guqin didn't have many friends, but he had many enemies. Therefore, Yi Guqin would face a greater challenge. Gu Zun's resistance would be less. On Gu Zun's stage, a woman in a white dress stood indifferently. She was LV Qinghan of Consonance Palace. Sigh, Qinghan. Centauria Palace Master felt a slight headache. With LV Qinghan's cultivation, it would be difficult for her to even exhaust Gu Zun, let alone injure him. But LV Qinghan insisted. Yi Guchen, you saved Qinghan's life, so I'll temporarily repay you today. LV Qinghan knew her limits, but she still chose to make a move. Facing a beauty like LV Qinghan, Gu Zun's blank expression didn't change in the slightest. It was as if he was looking at a piece of wood. In his eyes, there was no difference between men and women. Whoosh! Without any hesitation, Gu Zun attacked with his saber. Clang! A series of explosions rang out. During this period of time, LV Qinghan also received the Centauria Palace's palace master's careful guidance at any rate. Her strength also rose a lot. Unfortunately, he was still no match for Gu Zun. In the end, after exchanging dozens of blows, LV Qinghan's shoulder was cut open, and his figure retreated. Yi Guchen, this is all I can do. LV Qinghan smiled bitterly and left helplessly. Seeing this, everyone shook their heads. Looks like Gu Zun will be able to reach the top without any injuries today. Kenpo wanted to intervene, but with his spiritual bridge of heaven and earth strength and his status as the sword son of the Sword Dynasty, it would be inappropriate for him to intervene. As a result, everyone was shocked. Along the way, Gu Zun didn't encounter any obstructions. Gu Zun actually started to ascend the Violet Forbidden City's peak. On the other hand, Yi Guchen still had people obstructing him at every level. Is Gu Zun going to reach the top? Everyone was a little stunned. Gu Zun was still in his peak state. Even Feng Manlu furrowed his brows. This situation was extremely unfavorable for Yi Guchen. On the other side, the Sealing Saber Royal Hall's palace master was laughing. Ha, this is Gu Zun's power. When Gu Zun wins, the reputation of my Sealing Saber Royal Hall will definitely soar. At the side, Yu Bufan sighed. He actually wanted to witness an exciting sword and saber duel. He didn't want to see the result without any suspense. Feng Manlu, can your successor bring any surprises? Yu Bufan sighed inwardly. Look, Gu Zun is about to reach the top. Some cultivators exclaimed. Gu Zun was about to reach the Violet Forbidden City's peak without any obstructions. On the other hand, Yi Guchen was still 2 levels away from the Violet Forbidden City's peak. This way, Gu Zun would have a greater advantage. However, just as Gu Zun was about to reach the Violet Forbidden City's peak, a beautiful girl in a cyan dress fluttered her true chi wings and slowly descended from the sky. Her skin was white as snow and her eyes were as calm as a lake. Her slightly curled eyelashes were raised and her gaze was indifferent. She was like an azure lotus that had grown out of the mud. She landed lightly on the ground, and the silver bells hanging from her snow-white ankles jingled with each step she took. It was Su Jianshi. The hundreds of thousands of people present were stunned. Everyone knew how fierce Gu Zun was. Didn't they see that no one dared to stop Gu Zun? However, on the stage closest to the Violet Forbidden City's peak, the one standing in front of Gu Zun wasn't some famous genius. She was dressed in green and looked like a beautiful and sweet young girl. Who's that girl? Many people were puzzled. Was she asking for trouble if she dared to stop Gu Zun? Only those who had been to the 10 Lords elite gathering had a strange look in their eyes. Isn't that the girl who blocked Gu Xiaoyang's sword for Yi Jianshi in the Tianhuang Plains? She's still alive. Many people were surprised. They obviously didn't know the twists and turns. TSK, Yi Jianshi has such a beauty. She risked her life to block the sword and now she's helping Gu Zun. Many male cultivators were envious. What more could a man ask for with such a beauty? On the sword sect's side, Yan Wushuang's mouth was bitter. Because she was too weak, she couldn't even help Yi Guchen. She could only be a bystander. This girl. The white-haired man frowned as he looked at the girl in azure. She looked familiar, as if he had seen her somewhere before. On the Violet Forbidden Mountain, Su Jianshi was like an azure lotus as she held the longsword Yi Guchen had given her, the vermilion bird and I Huang. Gu Zun frowned as he looked at Su Jianshi. He actually felt a faint sense of danger from this young girl. It was like the undercurrent of a calm lake. Gu Zun's instinct told him that this girl wasn't as ordinary as she looked. I won't hold back. Gu Zun raised the seven slaughter ancient saber and said in a solemn tone. Come. Defeat me and you'll have the right to reach the top. Su Jianshi's eyes flashed coldly as her true qi erupted from her body. At the same time, on the other side of the violet forbidden mountain, Yi Guqin was focused on the battle on the other side of the mountain, so he didn't know that Su Jianshi had blocked Gu Zun's attack. Now that he had defeated his opponent, he only needed to reach the next level and the top of the violet forbidden mountain would be right in front of him. The last one. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep, as if he had a guess. The wound on his shoulder had stopped bleeding, but it still looked terrifying. Step by step, Yi Guqin reached the last level. At the end of the ring, there was a lone figure standing with his back to him. He was wearing a black and white Taoist robe and his long hair fluttered in the wind. The profound yin and profound yang swords were behind his back. He had his hands behind his back as if he had been waiting for a long time. Yi Guqin wasn't surprised. He stepped onto the stage. You're here. A faint voice came from the back of the figure. Chapter 698. The figure slowly turned around. His long black and white hair fluttered in the wind, and his face was expressionless. It was Xian Hao from the Limitless Sword Sect. Yi Guqin was not surprised at all. He would have been surprised if Xian Hao had not made a move today. Because the grievances between Yi Guqin and Xian Hao had been entangled for a long time. From the sword-seeking steel, when they first knew Xian Hao's name, to the Void Sword Realm, they started to become enemies. Xian Hao could have won the first place in the exchange meeting of the seven forces, but he lost in the end after fighting with Yi Guqin. However, Xian Hao was not dispirited, but continued to cultivate. Now that he had broken through to the life and death realm, his cultivation in all aspects had improved. His strength was no longer the same as before. You should know that this day will come. There will be an end between you and me. Xian Hao's dark eyes were incomparably deep. Now that the final battle had arrived, his state of mind had become even calmer. Indeed, Yi Guqin said lightly. Do you know that you have become my inner demon after the Void Sword Realm? If I don't get rid of you with my own hands, I will never be able to advance on the path of sword principle. Xian Hao stared straight at Yi Guqin, sword light flashing in his eyes. So this battle. Yi Guqin paused. There are only two results. Xian Hao said slowly. You die, or I die. As soon as Xian Hao finished speaking, it seemed that there was endless sword qi gushing out of his body. The void was trembling, and the sword qi was chaotic. Xian Hao's words meant that he had already made up his mind. There would be no leeway in this battle. After this battle, only one of Yi Guqin and Xian Hao could survive. Is this the only way? Yi Guqin sighed. To tell the truth, after going through so many grudges and grievances, he actually felt a trace of sympathy towards Xian Hao. Xian Hao was his enemy, and he also wanted to kill him. But he was different from black and white impermanence. At the exchange meeting of the seven forces, when the other talents besieged Yi Guqin, Xian Hao did not attack. His pride made him want to fight Yi Guqin alone to the death. Only such an enemy was worthy of being an opponent. You've already become my inner demon. Only by killing you can my sword Dao be flawless. So, I'll use this battle to end the enmity between us. As soon as Xian Hao's voice fell, the profound yin and profound yang swords behind his back rose into the air and landed in his hands. Alright, let's fight to the death and end all grudges. Yi Guqin pointed his sword at the ground. He was not a procrastinator. If you want to fight, then let's fight. Regardless of life and death. Boom. There were no more superfluous words between the two of them. It was as if two great stars had collided, and endless ripples of sword qi burst forth. He watched as Yiguchen and Xian Hao engaged in a great battle. The hundreds of thousands of people around the forbidden Purple Mountain were also watching nervously. There was no need to mention Xian Hao, the top genius of the Limitless Sword sect. He was a peerless sword genius with dual sword intents. He was also the only prodigy in the younger generation of the Limitless Sword sect who had completely comprehended the Limitless Sword art. There was no need to mention Yiguchen. If the battle between Yiguchen and Gu Zun was a duel between swords and sabers, then the battle between Yiguchen and Xian Hao was a duel between two prodigies of the sword Dao. Naturally, this would attract even more attention. Xian Hao, you must kill Yiguchen. Xian Tai said coldly in his heart. Senior brother Xian Hao is definitely not weaker than Yiguchen. Yes, senior brother Xian Hao's strength is not what it used to be. He will definitely kill Yiguchen. The disciples of the Limitless Sword sect all vowed solemnly. Xian Hao's status in the Limitless Sword sect was equivalent to Yiguchen's status in the Sword sect Pagoda Forest. However, his previous loss to Yiguchen had dimmed Xian Hao's halo. On the arena of the Forbidden Purple Mountain, the two of them fought fiercely. Their swords collided, and intense sounds of vibrating could be heard. Rainbow Sword Art, 9 Heavens Rainbow. Rain God Sword Art, Rainstorm Absolute Sword. Xian Hao wielded his two swords and the Dark Sun Sword light pierced the sky. The Dark Yin Sword was all-pervasive and attacked Yiguchen from all directions. Xian Hao was the only person in the younger generation who could wield the two swords to such perfection. An ordinary person would find it difficult to deal with the two swords. However, Yiguchen was like Mount Tai, standing tall and unwavering. The Xianming heavy sword swept out and destroyed all of Xian Hao's attacks. Great Void Sword Wave, Void Destruction. Yiguchen's sword vibrated and resonated with the void. The Great Void Sword Wave was a top-tier king-level sword art. Coupled with its ultimate move, the Void Destruction, its power was incomparably strong. Rumble. The fierce sword wave swept out in all directions like a wave that could destroy everything. Yiguchen is quite capable. He can actually cultivate a supreme-grade king sword art to the transcendent state. Some of the dynasty prodigies could not help but sigh. It was not easy to cultivate an ordinary king sword art to the transcendent state. Not to mention supreme-grade king sword arts. Xian Hao's expression changed slightly when he saw this. The supreme sword intent in his body gushed out. In an instant, the void around Xian Hao seemed to tremble. A powerful sword intent erupted as if it wanted to shake the heavens. It was the supreme void sword intent. That's sword intent. And it's a supreme sword intent. The sword intent that Xian Hao displayed caused some of the dynasty prodigies to exclaim. There were 3 grades of sword intent. Ordinary, Supreme, Creation. If Xian Hao had displayed an ordinary sword intent, they would not have lost their composure. A supreme sword intent was rare even for those top prodigies in the South Horizon region. As for the creation sword intent, it was even more unique. Yiguchen, use your full strength and display your sword intent, Xian Hao said coldly. Seeing this, Yiguchen did not hold back. The edgeless sword intent erupted. Waves of sword waves swept out and collided with the void sword intent. Another supreme sword intent? Some of the dynasty prodigies were stunned. He actually has sword intent too. Kei Ling, was surprised, and her expression was slightly embarrassed. She had once sparred with Yiguchen in the sword battle dojo and even displayed the fire sword intent. At that time, she thought that she had lost to Yiguchen because of the limitations of the venue. In the end, it seemed that Yiguchen himself possessed a supreme sword intent. In comparison, her fire sword intent was just an ordinary sword intent and was extremely shabby. On the arena, the two sword intents collided and exploded. Void Ultimate Domain, go! Xian Hao displayed the sword domain, which was the exclusive domain of the void sword intent. After displaying the sword domain, Xian Hao's aura skyrocketed again. The power of his sword moves was even stronger and faster. However, Yiguchen also displayed the edgeless sword Intent Sword Dao Domain. Gravity Sword Domain. The sword Intent boiled and turned into an illusory ancient sacred mountain. A gravitational field spread out and enveloped the entire arena, including Xian Hao. Boom! Xian Hao immediately felt as if there was an ancient sacred mountain pressing down on his shoulders. The boost from the Void Ultimate Domain was actually cancelled out. Yiguchen, you are indeed my nemesis. Xian Hao's eyes shot out a cold light. His attacks were completely countered by Yiguchen. Sky trampling 9 steps. Xian Hao took a few steps forward. With each step, his aura skyrocketed. In the end, Xian Hao's aura almost reached the peak of the life and death chamber. Taking advantage of this unstoppable aura, Xian Hao's sword aura swept out and wanted to shatter the world. Ultimate Sword Art, Invincible Sword. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.